Yo,
Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, fashionably late by a few minutes here. Life goes on. Joined again tonight by my man, Ace Stills. We are breaking down the ACC this evening, going to be talking about all the teams, all the DFS relevant, fantasy relevant, or either betting future relevant players and rotations, anything that we know that we want to bring up. Last night was extremely successful, got us rapping about the Big 12 and getting into that conference. Good response from you guys who had a chance to watch that throughout the day. We are just a handful of days away from Monday. Sunday night, there's going to be a big DFS show related to the slate on Monday, so I'm feeling pretty positive about that as I grind through college football the rest of this week. But tonight, me and my guy Ace Stills are going to talk ACC, and this is a conference that gets hyped to the moon every single year, and then it kind of has been falling flat lately. But I think this year, there's some teams that have some very big pull, some very big title aspirations. Obviously, North Carolina, maybe Duke, a couple of others who are going to be competitive. So, what do you think? We'll just dive right in here and get to it. What do you think about the overall, ACC? Like, what's your feeling about their chances to be a, Final Four contending conference, multiple teams, championship contenders? Like, how are you feeling about this conference as a whole?
yeah, I think this ACC conference is very top heavy. Like you said, North Carolina returns everybody, and then instead of Brady Manick, they bring in Pete Nance, and then bring in Seth Trimble. They're gonna have some more depth this year. I like them a lot. I like Duke a lot. I think Virginia can contend. I think Miami and Virginia Tech have good teams. Florida State, I think, is kind of that starting that second tier or tier, 2B. But I think this conference is very top heavy. Obviously, when you got 15 teams in a conference, you're going to get some bottom feeders like Georgia Tech this year. But I like the conference overall. I was watching some of the Duke exhibition today. They look good, and that was without the number one and number two recruit in the nation. So they've got a lot of depth. It's just a matter of if our boy John Shire in his first year can really get the pieces together and get them all to gel. But overall, I think this team's got three or four teams that can be Sweet 16 and above, Final Four good. So I'm excited to break it down.
Yeah, I mean, the like you mentioned, looking at it, top heavy. North Carolina, of course, they've got that experience. Duke's always, they're reloaded. They have a different coach. That's going to be a little bit of a weird thing to see on the sidelines. I think Virginia and Florida State are two teams that are going to definitely be, back in the mix here after a couple of down seasons, relatively speaking. Miami's coming off their, one of their best seasons ever. Virginia Tech is habitually underrated and overlooked, so I'm excited what they can do. NC State's got a superstar that I am absolutely enamored with and have been for quite some time. Notre Dame and Syracuse are solid, and then you've got the Louisville, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, Boston College kind of group that's going to have some DFS viability. What I like about the ACC is that these kind of bottom feeder teams or teams that lack in defense were very good teams to target against and for, and there was plenty of fantasy-friendly numbers coming out of those groups. And then, of course, Wake Forest, who is being projected to be pretty low again, but we saw that last year, and they, they made a big run, and I know they didn't make the dance, but they were first seed in the outright and won way more games than people thought. Had a kid get drafted that no one thought would get drafted in Jake Laravia, and just an amazing season. So I wouldn't count them out just yet. And this is almost a similar setup to last year. So we'll jump in here, and then after going team by team, we'll kind of circle back around, maybe give our favorite player or top fantasy performer from the conference a sneak, and then maybe if there's a little bit of time, just bringing up two or three other thoughts from other conferences and whatnot. So starting off, we'll start with the Boston College Eagles. Second year for Coach Earl Grant. Definitely a team that didn't quite put it together last year, but they have some solid pieces. They return a lot of the same players. So there'll be some nice continuity there between TJ Bickerstaff, DeMar Langford, Jaden Zachary, Mekhi Ashton Langford. Feels like he's been in college forever. And then Quentin Post, who the 4.7K special all the time. Quentin Post, probably going to be a starter. He's not going to sneak up on anybody this year, but I'm a big Post guy. I own him in Dynasty, and I'm excited to see what he can do this year. And then looking at it, a lot of unknowns on the bench between, Prince Aligbe, Donald Hand, Chaz Kelly, a lot of freshmen. They do have Mason Madsen coming in. CJ Pena. Those are their two main, veterans coming in on the bench. Madsen's from Cincinnati. Pena transferred in from Trevecca Nazarene, JUCO. And they're losing James Karnick and Brevin Galloway. So not a lot of known quantities on the bench. What do you think about them, and who are you looking at? Jaden Zachary, I'll put this thought out there. Jaden Zachary became kind of a DFS darling, not necessarily for myself, but I noticed him being drafted or owned a lot. He was always priced between like 5.4 and 6K, and it just seemed like that was the price point that people were always stuffing him in and using him. And he went through some growing pains, but this is the super soft season, so maybe we see a breakout out of him. What about him, and what else on this Boston College team do you see?
Yeah, I mean, we returned some pretty solid guys. I mean, Jaden Zachary, like we said, I mean, took 109 threes last year, shot 47% from three, played 84% of the minutes. He looks great. I think he's going to have the keys to the car. You get TJ Bickerstaff back for another year. He showed some flashes at times and was really effective. You get DeMar Langford back. So you get Quentin Post. You get kind of 4 or 5 starters. They lose Carnett. And then they bring in some, 2 4-star freshmen in the top 130 on 247 and Prince of League Bay and Donald Ham. I mean, if they can provide some lift off the bench, 2 guys with really good size, it seems like, Donald Ham at 6'5" is going to be more of a combo guard who can play on the perimeter and kind of be that third or fourth guy. And hopefully he can make some shots, because we saw the Langford brothers really struggle to shoot the ball last year. Both guys shot sub 30% from three. Bickerstaff struggled to shoot the ball. Outside of Zachary, man, this team really didn't shoot the ball well. So hoping to see them take the next step. They really struggled to defend the three, and they really struggled to make shots. Earl Grant really got the guys going last year. Their pesky bunch in the end of the season, they bought in. I think, they beat Pitt and Wake Forest in the ACC tournament, and they gave Miami a run for their money in OT. So, I mean, I do like this team in the sense that they're going to progress. They're projected 14 out of 15 teams or in the preseason. So, it's hard to temper expectations here. I mean, the schedule is pretty soft too. So they get Brody at home, first kind of real test. They're going to go at Nebraska, which they're projected to win, which would be a nice little, game against a Big Ten team on the road. And then they get Nova on a neutral. And then they play Duke pretty early on the third, which I thought was a little surprising. But I think this team, second year for Earl Grant, I think Zachary will be, one of these guys can be third team, second team in the conference if everything goes right. But I don't really see too much of this team. I mean, going anywhere. I think that they've got a couple of decent pieces, a couple of returners. Could they make a little bit more noise? Maybe finish, 11th, 10th in the conference, sure. But outside of that, I think there's just too many unknowns. I mean, for a conference that brings in a lot of high major transfers, to only really bring in Mason Madsen and not really grab anybody else kind of, scares me a little bit, because as we see, we're bringing in freshmen into the ACC. That's usually there's a bit of a learning curve. And I don't know if this team's going to have enough talent and enough shooting around it to be effective in the ACC, but we'll see. And then last year, they bought it defensively. They were okay. I mean, 120th in KenPom. And we know Earl Grant in his days at Charleston plays really slow. So on the DFS side, it's going to be hard to target them in the sense that they really want to slow the game down and minimize possessions. So, I mean, nothing special here. I think this is a decent team, maybe in the non-con, but outside of that, I think they're going to really struggle in the league. Anything you want to add, Walt?
No, just that, some of the unknown quantities coming in, the freshmen and the transfers. I think Madsen is a guy that people will recognize that name from Cincinnati, but it's not like he did a whole lot. He averaged like 5 points at Cincy for a couple of years. Pena was a 20-10 guy at Trevecca Nazarene. Actually, that was a Division II, not a JUCO, but kind of interesting to see how those guys come in. I did see a statement about Prince of Ligby being kind of a KJ McDaniels-esque type player. That's a really big name, not necessarily for NBA or anything, but for DFS purposes. And remember, McDaniels was a stud at Clemson, so where Grant coached for a little bit, and to have that kind of comparison definitely makes me want to pay attention to him. But I don't think there's a lot that I'm necessarily going to be looking at here. It'll be a situation like with last year on Boston College. Whenever their starters were underpriced, they were definitely valuable type, cash guys. main team lineup, not necessarily GPP high upside. Like there's not a really big star on this team, but there's a bunch of guys, 4 or 5 guys that can give you, these solid 3.5, 4x returns on their price points. You're just not going to see anybody really erupt for these big games. Once in a while, Zachary, if it gets hot, or once in a while, Langford or Bickerstaff when he's blocking shots, getting steals, rebounds, stuff like that. But Mekhi Ashton Langford, at this point, we've seen him for 4 or 5 years. We just know he's just going to turn it over, and he's going to give you, 10 to 12 points, and that's pretty much it. So there's a lot to learn here. But Quentin Post is going to be a dog. I think Quentin Post, as long as he doesn't foul, which is a big if, he is going to put up a really big number, like double type numbers often this year, especially with Carnett gone. Thank God, because I want to see Post play a lot of minutes. All right, moving on to Clemson, we got Brad Brownell. He's the Eternal. This is year 13 for him. Clemson is always a team that seems like they're in the mix. Maybe not so much as this, past couple seasons. And also every year I tend to have a Clemson player that I just fall in love with and roster all the time. A few years back, I was into Jerron Blossom game. I know Gabe Devo was a guy that people loved. After that, Marquise Reed was a guy that I always rostered. Elijah Thomas tortured us all the time with his high foul rate. Like they've had some good players come through here. And every single season it's like Clemson. I gotta chat about Clemson. Amir Sims, I came full circle on him, after never wanting to use him because he was kind of fouling and not really a factor. He'd always bust when he was chalk, but I really used him a lot last year, and he came through in a big way. So now we're back to Clemson. I also really love PJ Hall. I was a guy that was beating the drum on PJ Hall all the time. 30% usage rate, 31% shot rate. Primed for a big season. However, the injury, a freak injury happening here, the knee injury, that's a really tough way to go for him. I don't really know the extent of when he'll be back, but some people think he'll be back at towards the middle part of the season. Some think it won't be until if they're going to make the postseason. Some think it'll be after the non-con. So there's a couple of different variety things here with beat writers on Twitter. There are a lot of erroneous things said. We're seeing college football. I know you play NFL, so you probably see it, but in college football, we're seeing beats for the same team say the complete opposite things of each other. And I'm sure we're going to see that in college basketball as well, especially from Utah, who's terrible at it. But with PJ Hall, I don't feel too confident that he's going to be back anytime soon. And that's a shame, because without him, I think this Clemson team shakes out to be a really mediocre group. And there's a lot of usable, viable, cheap guys throughout the season, whether it was last year, Ben Middlebrooks, Ian Schiffelin. We saw Chase Hunter kind of emerge there. Alex Hemingway, Hunter Tyson was usually pretty solid. So with PJ Hall shelved, recovering from that knee injury, I think really there's 2 guys here in Hunter Tyson and Chase Hunter that could potentially blow the doors off of things and really put up a very high usage, high caliber fantasy total. You have Brevin Galloway coming in, who is going to give them, a little bit of offense and some experience coming over from Boston College. They have, 4 freshmen coming in between Dylan Hunter, RJ Godfrey, Chauncey Wiggins, and Chauncey Gibson. They're hoping that one of those guys, can give them some minutes here. So there's going to be, lots of, again, unknowns here in the way that college basketball is set up now. You hit the transfer portal, you bring in these guys, it's an arms race, and Clemson didn't win the arms race. They brought in Brevin Galloway and a bunch of youngsters, and their stud PJ Hall, who would probably be like a 20-12 guy this year if he was healthy. You take that away, and I just don't think that Hunter Tyson's going to be able to replace those numbers, and asking any of those freshmen to do it also is pretty unfair. So we'll see how that shakes out, but I think that Chase Hunter could potentially just be an absolute chucker on this Clemson team. David Collins gone, Nick Honor gone. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity for Chase Hunter to shoot the ball. And last year, after 2 seasons, pretty invisible out there, he started to come on, in the, late February. He had a couple of games over 20 points, became a fantasy darling, hit a couple of triples, but he was getting to the foul line often, just really consistent, rebounding the basketball. And he had like a 3 or 4 game stretch there to end the season where he was putting up over 20 fantasy points a game. So I'm interested to see how he does, but this Clemson team, man, things are going to be really, really tough for them. I'm in a team wins league where we draft teams in each conference, whatever. And Clemson sat there for a while, and I kept about to pull the trigger, but I just was too worried about that Hall injury, so I backed off. What do you think, man? Can they survive without Hall for a while, or is it just going to turn into a lost season for Brad? And I don't know that he can handle too many more lost seasons with that hot seat coming up. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Brad Brownell's had 3 NCAA tournament trips in 13 years. He hasn't really been going there too many times recently. I think once in the last 4 years. You lose David Collins, Dawes to Seton Hall, and you lose Nick Honor, you lose Nasbo. I mean, you lose a lot of guys, and then your stud is on the bench, with an injury for forever, how long it may be. You bring in, quality 3-star guys, but man, it's hard to win without elite guards, and Chase Hunter is really going to need to take that next step. Will he do it? It remains to be seen. They played an exhibition game against Benedict, and they blew him out. The starting 5, they had Chase Hunter, got 16 minutes, looked pretty good. Brevin Galloway started with Hemingway. Middlebrooks played the center spot, and Hunter Tyson was the best player on the floor with 19 and 7 in 15 minutes. So Ian Shofflin looked decent at times when he kind of filled in for that Nasbo, Hunter Tyson role on the floor when other guys were injured or in foul trouble. But yeah, there's really nothing here, that I'm really excited about. Maybe Chauncey Wiggins looked good in the preseason. Josh Beadle looked pretty good getting those minutes. But again, this is, against Benedict, and then I was taking a look at their schedule. They've faced the Citadel early, and then they get South Carolina in a true road game projected to lose by 2. Getting Iowa on a neutral, Penn State at home, and then Richmond is really their only other game. So the non-conference is soft. And then they get ACC play. They were projected 10th, which I thought was pretty high. Considering PJ Hall's out. If PJ Hall was in, I'm fine with them there. But if PJ is going to miss significant time, and it's going to take him time to get back into game speed and rhythm, I don't really see how this team even, sniffs a winning record this year. So really, Brownell's on the hot seat, but he doesn't have much to work with here. So I really don't see how he pulls this team together. But we'll see. If Brevin Galloway is another guy who keeps transfers within the conference, man, this is like crazy. I thought, back in the day in the old Big East, when guys would leave, you have to sit out a year and a half if you wanted to transfer within the conference. So guys would rather just sit out the year and leave. But we see it more and more, like we were talking about yesterday. But non-conference is soft for Clemson. In terms of DFS, Hunter Tyson, I kept playing him at the end of last year. It was like 4-7, and I knew he could shoot the 3, would get the 3-point bonus, he could rebound, run the floor, but Brownell was limiting him to about 20 minutes. On this team, I think he has to play 30 minutes. I think he's the guy that I'm really going to look towards. Same thing with Chase Hunter. We saw him, show flashes of him being able to get shots off and really lift, because his numbers on KenPom were a little perceiving last year at 16.5% shot rate. But, as we said, Dawes is gone, Honor's gone, Collins is gone. There's plenty of minutes to void here. Plenty of opportunities for him to take over that lead guard spot and maybe get his usage above 22%. So, DFS, we're going to have some spots here. That South Carolina game will probably be on the slate, and we'll target some of these guys early, kind of seeing what the prices are going to be like. But as a team, man, this is not a good team. And I think that's pretty much, we hit the nail on the head here. Is just really, there's not much without PJ. PJ was our guy. There's no PJ. So, yeah, it pretty much sums it up.
I'm really sad because I have the hashtag Walt's guys or Dubs guys, and PJ Hall was up there near the top. So I'm definitely disappointed. It's weird that like pundits haven't adjusted though. Like they're still pushing Clemson into this mid-tier range, and it's like, if those guys all overachieve and play above their heads, cool. But they're gonna have like the top 1% outcome for that to happen without PJ, and I'm just not sure that that's going to happen. Although the ACC is kind of weak at the bottom half, so
yeah,
maybe. All right, we have Duke up next. So I am admitted Duke hater, so the John Shire era at Duke here for me. I'm hoping it's a bust, but we'll see. It's gonna be weird seeing somebody other than Coach K on the sidelines, but Shire, man, he's just proven himself to be a one-man wrecking crew on the recruiting trail. It's Duke. You could put literally anybody behind him. Well, aside from a couple people, but most people you could throw behind the sidelines there and just say, hey, I'm the coach of Duke. And you could probably get them to come play for you. So, it's a great job by him. But at the end of the day, it's the name Duke. They've got a massive class. Derek Lively, number 1, Dariq Whitehead, number 2, Kyle Flipowski, number 4, Mark Mitchell, who I actually like a lot at number 22. I think he's the guy that will come back next year and be just a total stud. Jaden Shoot, top 70. Tyrese Proctor, who reclassified. Not a huge fan of players who reclassify, especially when they're kind of borderline like him. But they've got a lot of talent. And then, of course, they bring in, some veterans to kind of help out. Jacob Granderson, comes from Illinois. Ryan Young from Northwestern. Puzzling choice by Ryan Young. I thought he'd want to get minutes with Nance leaving, but I guess not. Jalen Blakes, Cale Catchings, and Max Johns, those guys are all deep bench, won't play. So it's a deep roster potentially. I will say, watching some of that game today, and we'll get your take, the exhibition game they played, Mark Mitchell definitely looked the part. I know they're playing against, Fayetteville State or something like that. But Mark Mitchell in the the circuit, AU circuit, and watching in those all-star games and stuff like that, he was just a guy that never fooled around. Like everybody's, they're seeing their friends and they're joking around. Like he was just a focused kid. When when they got on the floor, he was doing his thing, grabbing rebounds, taking shots, like just a total gamer through and through. And I am really quite excited. And I even said that at the beginning when this class came out, like, hey, that Mitchell kid, he's going to be the guy that we're going to be able to use in DFS. Maybe not as much right away because there's such a loaded group here and they're all going to want the ball, but he'll be a guy like, Mark Williams, who maybe kind of treads water that first season. And then, right after that, he comes back for a year or two and just eats hard. Everybody's like, wow, let's get out of the way. This kid's going to just kill. I could definitely see that happening for him. And he's my favorite player on the team by far. Flipowski and Lively and Whitehead are going to get all this press and Proctor to a degree, but I think that Mitchell is going to be the guy that is the most consistent fantasy option on a regular basis. He may not have this huge spikes, but he's also not going to have these super lows either. Injury stuff going on with Lively and Whitehead, both, missing. The latest after the game was that, there's going to be a day-to-day tag for Lively. Whitehead, it sounds like, is going to miss at least 3 games, which means he would miss that Kansas game. So, I thought for sure he would return, but looking at it and reading into it more, it looks like he's just, they're not going to clear him. Duke missing a couple of guys here. Maybe that affects things in that Kansas game. Definitely going to be watching that closely. I do feel like these early season games for Duke, when they're, meshing new guys together, there's a tendency for them to get a little, smack in the mouth before they figure it out. Because I'll definitely be betting Kansas depending on what that line is. But what's your take, man, after watching a little bit of Duke today and knowing there's injuries coming into it? Do they have the depth to kind of, withstand that and get all these guys glued together and playing well? Granderson led the team in scoring today, by the way.
Mr. Illinois. He's going to be really looking to be that floor spacer. I thought when Ryan Young first transferred in, I was like the same thing. I was like, Ryan, dude, do you not want to play ball? Like, you just want to win? Like, that's cool. He started today, played well. He had a plus-minus of 28. Him and Mark Mitchell led it. And then Jeremy Roach was just consistent. I think they priced Roach over like 8,300 opening. And again, like cupcakes, man, it's just like he's not going to shoot the ball. Like, he's not even going to shoot the ball.
No.
We'll look at his assist props on Prize Picks and stuff like that. But, early on, it's just like I was really impressed with Tyrese Proctor. I think he's got a lot of game, and he's a true freshman. He looked great. He's only 6'4" listed, but he felt like he played so much bigger. I don't know if it was just Fayetteville State was so tiny, but he looked great. He could get to the rim. He was rebounding, running. I liked his game a lot. And, yeah, Mark Mitchell was every bit the part. And without Lively and Whitehead on the court, he was just able to, be free and easy, play his game. I'm just worried about how many mouths we're going to feed because I expect Lively's going to take Ryan Young's minutes and then Proctor's going to get his minutes taken by Whitehead. And then from there, we're going to, off the bench, it's kind of been like who's going to have the hot hand, who's going to get a lot of these minutes from Shire. And Shire's going to run the same system. We saw it today. It's that intense man-to-man defense. They will give up some back doors and they will give up plays to guards who can create their own shot and who have plenty of volume. They'll be able to get theirs against Duke. That's always been the case. Duke's always going to play that man-to-man, right in your mouth, smash mouth to you. They don't really play much zone unless Coach K, thought that his defense was just atrocious and man-to-man was the only time he ever went to zone. I don't think he's going to have that problem this year. Their length and size was just very impressive and overwhelming. I think that this team has all the pieces to be a Final Four national title contender. It's just, what are we going to get from Shire in his first year coaching? Can he mesh all these superstars together? Because there's only one basketball, like I always say. I was also impressed with Jalen Blakes. I thought he played pretty well too. He's going to get some more minutes with Whitehead out, and I think this team is going to go. Once Lively and Whitehead are back, I think this is a 9 deep, and it's kind of going to be hard to say who's going to be the ninth guy here. So I mean, overall for DFS, there's going to be some nights where we're going to get some clear options just based on pricing, but then there's going to be nights where DraftKings is really going to price that algorithm correctly, and we're going to have a hard time deciding where we want to go. I like at first check, I saw Lively was up at 8,100 opening night. If he starts and he's ready to go, I think that's a walking double-double. So overall, I thought they looked really good. I thought they looked the part early on. I mean, they were giving up like 0 second chance points, 0 points off live ball turnovers, like everything you wanted to see at a Duke in an exhibition game. They look great. So they're going to be fun to target. I mean, when you have the number 1, number 2, number 4, number like 20 recruit, no 22, 27, 69, and then you bring in Jacob Granderson, who was pretty good at Illinois. He could shot over 40% from 3 and can switch on defense and guard multiple positions. And then you bring in a guy like Ryan Young to be like your 8th or 9th guy off the bench and play like 12 minutes a game when guys get into foul trouble. He's last year's Theo John with a little more offensive firepower. So, I mean, I have no qualms with this team. I think this team's great. And then I was looking over their non-conference. Obviously, we have that Champions Classic game against Kansas Circle. That's going to be a great one. And then you got Ohio State at home. You got Iowa. And outside of that, I mean, it wasn't, anything crazy. And then, the ACC's got enough teams out of 15 that you got to try to play most of these teams twice. So it kind of limits the non-conference a little bit. But this Duke team's got everything that you want to be a title contender. And I thought that they were a little too low at 15, according to KenPom. I had them more around 7, 8 with the potential to be a top 5 team. But yeah, I think Duke's great. I think they look the part today. And it's just a matter of, what the pricing is going to be and where we can attack. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, there's they tend to be with Duke and teams like that, they tend to be pretty aggressive with their pricing, and we'll have to see with how this rotation does shake out. But I think there's going to be, it always starts out this way, there's too many mouths to feed, because I feel the same way about teams like Kentucky and Duke, and I say it, but then as time goes on, they do kind of trim things down and trim the fat off. But I feel like this team's definitely going to be playing that 8 or 9 deep most of the season. So unless Ryan Young knows something that we don't, I still am questioning that transfer, but we'll see. All right, a team with some much more interested in, I guess, there's a lot of unknowns here because it's Leonard Hamilton and the Florida State Seminoles. No postseason for them last year. You don't really see that from a Florida State team too often, but they were injury prone to the max, losing guys left and right. It just a really tough season for that. It caused guys like, Matthew Cleveland, Jalen Worley, Naheem McLeod to really grow up quite quick and get that experience that they needed to, be able to come into it now with a healthy Caleb Mills and really compete at a high level. The 5 main returners, Mills, Cleveland, Fletcher, McLeod, and Worley are all really solid options. They brought in the kid from overseas, Baba Miller, even though he's going to be suspended for a little bit and miss time. Darren Green from UCF, he's a nice piece that they brought in. They have a huge amount of freshmen, another 5 or 6 guys like Chandler Jackson, Tom House, Deontay Green. So there's a lot of youth. I do feel like, I haven't double checked this, but it's got to be one of the youngest teams Leonard Hamilton's ever had in his life. He's usually pretty good about, he loses a one or done here. He loses a guy after 2 years, like my man Mifiano Kabengele, but he just usually has the experience left over because he has such a damn large rotation that he's okay with losing these guys. But now that Malik Osborne, Anthony Polite, John Butler, really sad about John Butler going pro, but whatever. And then Ray Evans gone. So those are some big pieces that are all gone. And 2 of those guys easily could have come back. Like if John Butler decided to come back, he would have had a Kabengele-like season. But they don't have that ability. They don't have that happening. This is what the team looked like in their exhibition game. Baba Miller played really well, but again, he's going to be suspended. He had 11 points, 4 assists, 7 rebounds. Really exciting player, but toss him aside for now. Naheem McLeod manning the 5, 11 points, 9 rebounds. 5 block shots, just a menace down there. Again, an exhibition game, but he's going to be playing a lot of the 5. Caleb Mills is the guy that, is going to obviously be chucking a lot. He had 9 assists in that exhibition game, an element to his game that maybe people don't talk about quite as much, but something that I'm excited to see. Darren Green started, played damn near 40 minutes, had 15 points, shot 11 times, most of which were threes. He's going to be a gunner for them, taking a ton of triples. That's what he does. And then Matthew Cleveland, who's probably the one I'm most excited about, although he had a pretty terrible game. 0 for 9 from the field, not what we want to see from him. Maybe that keeps his price down lower if people are not looking his way. Did contribute 5 rebounds, 2 assists, but played 31 minutes. Cleveland kind of had ups and downs last year, but he's a guy that I have my eye on and somebody that's probably the most intriguing player for me on this FSU team. And then, of course, you have guys like Cam Fletcher coming off the bench, possibly starting with Miller, suspended, going to be doing a lot of things off the bench. He had 8, 2, and 10 in that exhibition game. Somebody who has a lot of talent, perfect for this Leonard Hamilton team. There's going to be a random freshman or a walk-on guy as the season goes on that he's going to pull out of his ass. He does this all the time. And just when you think you've got this rotation figured out, all of a sudden, this third-year walk-on comes out of the stands and pulls a superhero game. And you're like, where the hell did he get this kid from? So be advised that is certainly something that's going to happen. What was it? Was it Tanner and Gom? I think it might have been Tanner and Gom last year that had this like really weird 11 point, like 3-4 block game in like, I don't know, 20 minutes. And it's like, what happened with this? Why is he playing him so many minutes? But I like this FSU team. I like them to bounce back and get back. Oh, no, it's Harrison Preto. That's who it was. Harrison Preto. Preto comes out of nowhere and suddenly plays this massive, like, huge game after playing, on the bench, never was walking on. What he had, I think he had like 14. Okay, here's the game: 14 and 6 in 27 minutes against Virginia, 2 blocks, 2 assists, and he knocked down both of his triples. So the weirdest game I've ever seen out of a random walk on. But what do you think, man? I like this team as betting proposition. I like, depending on what odds you can get to win the conference. I like them as a potential sneaky, get under the skin of North Carolina and Duke team. Leonard Hamilton, you can never count his elderly self out. I like them as kind of a dark horse team to make some noise and maybe even pull a 1 seed out of their but I like this team and how it sets up and a typically deep Leonard Hamilton team usually is a turnoff for DFS, but I do look at this roster and I feel like I have a pretty good handle on where the usage is going to come and how things are going to shake out. So, and especially with Bobo Miller missing some time here. When he returns, that'll kind of rotate things around a little bit. But for now, I think we have probably 7 or 8 guys that I think we can rely on a regular basis to play a lot of minutes. So what's your take on the Seminoles?
Yeah, I mean, it was an uncharacteristic year for the Seminoles. I mean, they finished, 105th in defensive efficiency. And, 3 years prior, they've been inside the top 40. So it's unlike Leonard Hamilton to not have, a great defensive team with his, 4 centers above 7'3". But this year, we lose Bobo to half the season, which is great for my matchup against the Johnnies in the Orange Bowl, so I was a little happy when I saw that a little bit. So, but, you bring in Darren Green, we saw him chalk for 4 years, and it looks like he's going to get every minute because according to the scrimmage, they want him at the 2 guard and they want him to create some floor spacing because Matthew Cleveland couldn't hit the side of a barn today. He was holding 9 from the field. Caleb Mills looks like he might be playing a little point forward this year for this team because I feel like I'm struggling to see a true point guard for this team. I mean, I feel like we have good guards here, but I feel like we don't have a true point guard. Cameron Fletcher was great off the bench at times last year. We played him a ton at like 4K, 4,200. And then you bring in 6 freshmen, so it remains to be seen. We get, Deontay Green, who I didn't see check in today. He didn't play. I don't know what was going on with him. And then the transfer, Jalen Gainey, who was actually a really good a mid-major big defender for Brown. He didn't play either. So I don't really know what's going on.
He's hurt. He's out he got hurt for the season, so he won't be playing.
Done? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
that's tough.
It's sure. Weird because, like, we're used to, like you said, like, we're used to 7, 8, 9, 10 guys from Leonard Hamilton because he loves to press and, force turnovers and wreak havoc. He couldn't do that as much last year with all the injuries. But We get a healthy Caleb Mills, which I think he's definitely a breakout candidate for us after, being the preseason American Player of the Year before he left Houston. And we're gonna have to see Naheem McLeod. He's gonna have to step up and play big minutes at the center this year. You lose Butler, now you lose Baba. I mean, you lose Gainey. Like, he's gonna be a guy in DFS that might start out the year at 4K, in that range, and we could play him. He had 11 and 9 today. He can block shots. He ended up with 5 block shots. So it's somebody we could look to depending on pricing. And then they're going to go with that heavy 3-guard lineup, maybe even 4 guards with Cameron Fletcher or one of the freshmen like Cameron Corrin sneaking into the starting lineup. So I think we're going to definitely know where to go with them. It's weird because I'm used to this Florida State team being preseason top 30. And, KenPom has them at 65. They haven't projected to lose to Florida at home in that Florida Sunshine State battle. They haven't projected to lose to Purdue at home, which I was, fine with, but in a nail biter. And then they get, my Johnnies in a semi-home game, and Johnnies just don't win games in the non-conference on the road. And even the Johnnies are projected to beat them by 2 in the Orange Bowl. So we'll see how it goes. I like the pieces on this team. I like Leonard Hamilton as a coach, and I think that they're going to gel better because last year, they were so banged up that these freshmen had to grow up quick, and now they got meaningful experience in the conference. Like you said, it sucked to lose John Butler and his ability to shoot the 3. I mean, he was, 40% 3-point shooter at 7'1", able to stretch the floor, play pick and roll. So that's going to really hurt them. And, Naheem McLeod is really a guy that I think we're going to be using in DFS if his price is 4K and below, especially early on in some of these matchups, because in that game against Purdue, who the hell is going to guard Zach Edey? Because I really have no idea. That's going to be freaking scary. And Colin Castleton against Florida, man, they're really going to struggle in those 2 matchups down low. But I think this team can surprise just because the guard play is really good. It's just a matter of, can we get Caleb Mills to be a first-team All-ACC guy? And then can the supporting cast, really hang in there and help Leonard Hamilton, press and do the things that he wants to do in years past that he wasn't able to do last year uncharacteristically. I mean, normally a Leonard Hamilton type team is really good at shooting the 3, and last year they couldn't shoot the 3, they couldn't defend the 3, and they couldn't defensive rebound. So it was scary. But the one nice thing for DFS is that Hamilton always wants to play with pace, and last year they couldn't defend and they played with pace. So it was beautiful. But we'll see how it goes this year. I think that this is a middle of the pack team. I think, what were they projected in the conference? I think it was 5th, which I thought was a little high. In that Notre Dame, I thought Virginia Tech has definitely got better pieces on paper to be better than them, but we'll see. I think this is more of a 6th or 7th place team. I don't know if I'm as high as you on them, but I think this is a borderline NCAA team if everything goes right. But I think it's going to be tough for them without Baba the first half of the year to kind of steal one of these marquee non-conference games.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely I just don't see a second straight down year for them. But yeah, it depends on health. They're gonna have to keep this group healthy, which they couldn't do last year. And yeah, obviously somebody's gonna have to emerge out of this freshman group with Miller out. So I don't know. I think they'll be able to eat games out with guys like Mills and Green making buckets and Leonard Hamilton being such a savvy coach. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting team to track. Now, you alluded to McLeod being really the only big. So say he gets into foul trouble. Looking at this, digging into this game a little bit more against Newberry College, points in the paint, they gave up 32 to Newberry. Second chance points 13. Which is a little alarming when you consider who they were playing. The center for Newberry had 8 rebounds. Wasn't a big scorer, but he had 8 rebounds. Their power forward had 6 rebounds. Their kind of combo guard forward, TJ Brown, who's a big stud for them. He had 10 rebounds, 18 points. So I think we might be looking at a spot here where early DVP we can target, and that means Joel Soriano, who had a massively good foreign trip. Really, I was harping about him the other night. His foreign trip was amazing. So, yeah, this might be an early DVP spot because I don't know, man. McLeod played 24 minutes against them today, or a couple. When was this game? A couple of days ago, and I don't think that he's going to be a 30-minute guy. I don't think we're going to see that from him. So they're going to have a noticeable drop off most likely when he has to be on the bench. And any team with a capable post player or even a guy who is capable rebounder, might see some trouble because Miller's 6'11". Like they were clearly counting on him. Jalen Gainey's 6'10". So Gainey's done for the season. That's rough. He was averaging 7 rebounds a game, and then Miller, he's out for like a quarter to a half of the season. The only other guy they really have, Deontay Green at 6'10" and Cameron Corhan at 6'10", both freshmen. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work out. Like you said, that's rough. So I'm still pretty high on them because at the end of the day, guards are what's going to win you games, especially late. If they don't get blasted early and fall way too far behind, I don't think anybody wants to see this team in a tournament-like setting when it's all said and done and they're at full strength. As full strength as they could be. All right, moving on. Georgia Tech, we have Josh Pastner. Somehow in his 7th season of torturing us at Georgia Tech, not as much. He was a much more of a torturer of DFS players at Memphis. Like he with Trash Can Burrell, like he really took money from me there a lot more than he does at Georgia Tech because they typically just kind of stay away. Or for a while we knew who we could roster between Alvarado and a couple of other guys. Now we have a team coming into it that has some intriguing pieces. Actually, they're probably still going to lose a lot of games. Like they won 5 conference games last year. They may not win that many this season, but it's a team that I kind of like for fantasy purposes, and I'm super high on several of their guys. And one of them is Miles Kelly, and that might be because I own him in Dynasty, but I was on this kid pretty early. I know everybody's going to be talking about Debo Coleman and how good he could be as a breakout candidate, and I definitely think that he's going to be good. He's going to have the ball a lot. But Miles Kelly, man, he was towards the end of the season was coming on so strong. They were giving him a lot bigger minutes. He was exploding. I think he actually eclipsed 5K at some point because of the games he was having were so big. Pulling up some of his late season lines here. All right, so to end the season against Louisville, he had 19 points on 3 of 4 from downtown. Boston College, 16, 3 of 5 from downtown. He had a bunch of 9, 10, 6, a couple of threes in like 8 minutes. So really came on at the end of the season there and had some pretty high usage rates up in the 21 to 22% range. So somebody that they're clearly going to have to lean on this season. Debo Coleman, they're going to have to lean on a lot. Jordan Usher is gone. Michael Devo is gone. Like that old regime Georgia Tech team that was so good for DFS is all completely gone now. The Moses Wright, Jose Alvarado, Michael Devo, Jordan Usher, like that foursome, man, like they were awesome. And Usher made us a bunch of money as a low-owned guy last year because everybody would go Devo, but Devo as the ball carrier, her ball handler just wasn't where it was at for him, right? So we could have got some money off Usher. So we'll have to identify some of the lower-owned guys. And like I said, I'm already seeing a ton of hype on Coleman as the primary breakout, and everybody's writing about him, talking about him. Kyle Sturdivant is and Rodney Howard are kind of the veteran leaders of this team, so they're getting some hype, and Davon Smith is going to be playing a lot of point guard, running the offense, initiating for them, which they need a good quality point guard that doesn't need to look to score the ball. That's the better role for this team. So Kelly's just going to be falling by the wayside, and if he comes into the season anywhere under 5.5 or even like under 6, I'm going to probably pull the trigger. And that's part of me is because when you're my guy, I'm going to roster you all the time. But he's going to be a big time scorer. And I think that people are just being silly by not talking about him. So they have, a transfer coming in from Gardner Webb. Gardner Webb was a pretty decent team, at least offensively. Lance Terry, South Alabama transfer, Javon Franklin, just some bench pieces, a couple of freshmen, one from Latvia, Bagdaskis. He's a guy that Pastner has been talking about as a contributor, but he's just a 6'8", kid that's pretty raw. So I suppose if Rodney Howard gets himself into foul trouble or something happens there, there'll be some minutes coming available for him. But this team, I think they're going to be a lot of rat ball-esque type playing, and it's going to lead to a lot of fun, inefficient fantasy games because we don't get points on high efficient shooting, but I'll gladly take a kid that's going to shoot 15 plus times, even if it means he only makes 5 or 6. So what do you think? Is this the year that Josh Pastner finally gets let go? Let's start with that. And then where are you at with, Debo Coleman and some of these other guys?
Yeah, I mean, Pastner's got one NCAA trip in what is it, his 8th year? I mean, and he just lost all this talent of, guys that we love playing in Usher and Alvarado, and he brings in, mid-major transfers trying to up transfer. And again, like I looked Lance Terry and Franklin, maybe they're, little contributors, 15, 20-minute guys, but it's going to be a struggle, man. And then they bring in two completely unknowns and Cyril Martinov from Jersey and Bagdaskis, 6'9" guard, it says on 247. So let's see. I don't really know what to make of it. And also, they lead off the season. They're playing Clayton State on the schedule, man. Your RPA only goes down when you play these guys in a real game. And yeah, they need to get wins somehow. So they're going to play Clayton State in a real game. So, I mean, tempo was pretty good last year. Passers been pretty good about keeping in like the 150s or lower. So I think we're going to, have some fantasy goodness here. But I think this is a team that's going to really play just pretty much a lot of guards. It's going to be like, 4 out and 1 in with like Rodney Howard and maybe some Jordan Mika and it's just going to be a lot of creating and a lot of motion offense, I think. So, I mean, I like Miles Kelly a lot. He flashed his 4-star recruiting that we were hyping up last year. Remember you hyped him up for 3K opening night. We had to play him a little bit,
That's right. We did. Yeah.
And you're just too early on him because we knew like how deep can we dive into these 4-stars and see how many guys are going to get minutes. I took some shots on Coleman. It's funny, for most of the year and like years past, I refused to play Sturtevant, but he actually played pretty well down the stretch in ACC play last year. But
yeah,
he disappears a ton, and these guys who return, DraftKings is pretty good about pricing them and like they kind of where they left off last year or even higher, which is scary. So I mean, if these guys are coming in on their first slate at like Sturtevant's over like 6,500, it's just like, all right, it's a free stay away. But Davion Smith, former 4-star recruit, transfer from I think it was A&M, and they got some guards here. I like their guards, but their lack of size outside of, Rodney Howard, who, is just a back to the basket, traditional old school big who can defend. There's really not much here. Like, they're not going to really run much post offense. They're not really going to play a lot of inside out unless it's dribble penetration. So I'm not really, I think this team is pretty much, going to be fun for DFS in the sense that we're going to love to target against them. And pretty much we're going to just target these guards whenever we see that there's a discrepancy in price or their props. But outside of that, this is going to be a really ugly season because there's a lot of L's. When an ACC team is projected 117, and I think that's still too high, there's a problem. So, I mean, they get Utah on a neutral. They get a true road game against Iowa in the Big Ten ACC, and then they get Georgia at home against Mike White in his first season. And that's really it. And then a couple of cupcakes. So, there's really not much here. I mean, this non-conference is soft, and the team, I just don't see how they even get. I don't even see how they sniff 10 games. So pretty much keep it moving on them.
It's tough, man. They're really going to be relying on. I think they're going to try to rely a lot on Javon Franklin at times. He was at Auburn as a bench warmer for a couple of years, kind of balled out for South Alabama, but. There's some pieces that he's just hoping are going to, he's throwing some stuff at the wall and hoping it's going to stick. And I think that they're going to be a low-owned group most of the season. But we've been seeing Georgia Tech games just have like mini stacks of Georgia Tech every single year have turned into just amazing GPP winning opportunities. So I'm certainly going to be looking at them. And now they don't have the name brand guys. People will probably look away, but that's still going to be a high scoring game anytime they're on the slate. So just keep that in mind. All right, moving on to what could be even a worse situation somehow, even though they have the talent, they have an exciting coach in Kenny Payne, but the Louisville Cardinals coming into it, there's a little bit of hype and excitement on them, and they're recruiting heavily, and there's DJ Wagner's kid they're trying to grab, and there's he's starting to sound like they're not going to get him. They just missed out on another recruit. Then they turn around in their exhibition game, and it's exhibition, so whatever. But to lose by 10 points to Lenoir Rhine in your building on an exhibition game doesn't feel great. Can't feel great. It might be a rough season for Louisville, and suddenly the excited fans are suddenly not so excited. Jalen Withers had an amazing game, 20 and 10. I think he's a guy who's going to be big time for them, but L. Ellis couldn't make any shots. He did have 6 assists, 4 turnovers though. The rest of the pieces they have, like guys like Hersey Miller, Roosevelt Wheeler, Kamari Lands, JJ Traynor, like there's suddenly not a lot to like here. I was excited when they first brought in Brandon Hentley Hatfield, and he had 4 blocks in that game, but he really wasn't impacting anything offensively, and he still looked, and it was one game. but he still looked too limited offensively to impact anything. And that was one of the main reasons he didn't get a lot of, opportunities at Tennessee. And he decided to transfer knowing he'd get more minutes because he wasn't going to be playing over some of these the Vols guys are really high level, all of them. And he wasn't going to be playing over any of them. And as a 6'10", 250 kid, he's really not so speedy, so he's going to have some post moves and be able to score like Isaiah Stewart did at his one season at Washington, like that type of score. And I'm just not sure we're going to see it from him. So that's kind of my quick brief rundown. I'll let you do the deep dive on this team, but my God, things are looking bad. Recruiting was once promising for next year, is now falling apart, and they haven't even got started under Kenny Payne yet. So what's going on here with Louisville?
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, you lose an exhibition game and it's just never going to feel good. The good thing is it's an exhibition game, but I mean, listen, I think we're going to get a lot of Kamari Lands. He's going to get a lot of minutes, and I think we're going to eventually see some Devin Reed, the other 4-star recruit, definitely getting some minutes, and we're going to definitely target these guys at a low price. And then you bring in Hatfield, former 5-star recruit. At Tennessee, he would start for them, but then he'd get pulled at like the under 16 and play 14 minutes a game. Wasn't really super effective. And then you bring in Hersey Miller, who couldn't get on the court at Xavier. The one guy I seem to be pretty excited about, who I think has a chance to show some flashes, is Mike James. He tore his ACL last year, former top 100 kid. Played well in the exhibition, got 25 minutes. I mean, he shot 3 threes. He's still coming off knocking some rust, but nobody knows about him. I'm hoping DraftKings doesn't either. Maybe we can sneak him in at like 3K, 3,500 on a first couple of slates. And then, Withers is going to be the guy. It feels like this is his team. Last year, he came off the bench a ton, and we wanted him to get back into the starting lineup. And, Chris Mack couldn't get the rotations right until after they, did the complete switch, and they just played Curry. They played, L. Ellis at the point. It's just we couldn't get this team right. Like, they just had too many guys who were just okay, and it was just very frustrating. This team, it seems like we know where the ball is going to go, at least in the beginning of the season, in terms of when they're going to try to, knock off some of these teams in non-conference. Like, it's L. Ellis's ball. Like, he shot 1 of 7, but we know how lethal he can be, and he can break a slate at any time. Especially most of last year, he was so cheap. He was like in the 4K range, and we were getting 9 or 10 shots. If Chris Mack didn't bench him or Kenny Payne didn't bench him, it's just trying to figure out like where the minutes are going to go here. I mean, Sidney Curry broke some slates with some double doubles. He wasn't really effective. He's not really much of a shooter, but he's a traditional, girthy big, 6'7", undersized, who plays below the rim, but he's going to be pretty big. And I think we can use him in some slates against some non-conference opponents. But yeah, I mean, listen, this team's not very exciting, and I think this is, they're better than Georgia Tech. I think they're going to be better than they're going to be in that like pit range at like 12 or 13. I think they're not even as good as NC State or even a Wake Forest, but they have a preseason pick 9th, which I thought was a little surprising too, because there's just really not much here. You got a first-year head coach, and the talent is just not what it used to be. So outside of having the Yum Center and a sick home court advantage, man, this team, I don't really like the personnel. Like, you have, Withers might be your best shooter, like, on this whole team. Like, this team doesn't look like they have any shooting at all. They're going to play like 2 or 3 bigs like Curry and Hatchfield, who don't really like to play on the perimeter, or at least aren't, great perimeter shooters to really stretch the defense out and give out and get some nice driving lanes for L. Ellis and Kamari Lanes. And so I'm really just skeptical about the roster in general. It's got plenty of top 100 recruits, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to gel. So outside of that, I'm not really in love with this team. And then I was looking at their, in their non-con, you got a ton of cupcakes early till they get Arkansas on a neutral, which, Kempom only has that at about 10 or 11 points right now, which seems like it's probably going to be like a 25-point blowout unless I'm missing something. They get Maryland at home, and then they get Miami early. I mean, this is really it's weird. The ACC starts so early. It starts in the beginning of December, so they lose a lot of these non-con games, and then they play a couple of cupcakes. So it's really, and then they get Kentucky at Rupp, which seems like it's just going to be a freaking disaster. But this team is just back end ACC team. I don't even think they're going to break like 12 or 13 wins. I mean, I don't like the roster construction. I don't hate Kenny Payne. I just don't know what he's going to be able to do in an ACC that has a lot of teams that have a lot more talent than he does. And outside of these bottom end teams that he can try to beat up on, there's really not much here that I'm really in love with. And they didn't really, if Hatchfield doesn't take the next step, it's just, I don't really know what they're going to give us on offense. Like there's going to be some games where they're going to play, Pittsburgh, they're going to play like, Boston College, some Georgia Tech, and where the hell they're going to be points scored. Like this team's going to really struggle to score. They couldn't even score against, a D3 the other night. So it's going to be ugly, but I'll pray for Kenny Payne, but I don't see too much here.
Yeah, he'll get a reprieve. It's year one, but he's really going to need the version of, Jalen Withers to step up. We saw that flash from him, his first year, and then he kind of regressed a little bit and was hit or miss last season. And then Sidney Curry was the one who really kind of developed and took over as a prime option there for the mid part of the season before Ellis eventually, became a viable guy too. But Sidney Curry had a 25% usage rate, a shot rate just under 24%. High defensive rebounding rate. So he's a guy that I think, as the kind of the elder statesman on the team, I think he's one of the few seniors there, him and Ellis, that is on the team that will be asked to kind of carry the load, because truthfully, I just don't think that BHH is there offensively yet where he's going to impact games. And this Louisville roster is in desperate need of guards, man. Like you look at their roster and it looks like they're going to run like you talk about the 4-guard lineup. Looks like they're going to run a 4-forward lineup. Like I just don't see, if Ellis, he in that exhibition game, I kind of dug into that a little bit earlier today, and they started off hot, and he assisted on the first 3 baskets. Then he picked up his second foul at like the 15-minute mark, and things just went downhill from there. They turned it over. They let them, that team score. The offense stagnated. So that's going to be a really obvious game plan of their opposition, is just to go at Ellis hard and hope he's going to be, undisciplined and reach. And the second that he gets the 2 foul, like, what are they going to do? Hercy Miller's not going to come in and run the offense. He can barely even play. Fabio Basile is way too young. And Mike James, who is more of a wing. I mean, there's a disaster here without guards. Like in that with the transfer portal, how flush it was, like, this couldn't happen. You cannot let this happen. And I don't know. They went out and they prioritized Hatfield, which is fine. They got, a couple of good freshmen for the future that are kind of role player-esque right now. I mean, Devin Ree has the potential to be more than that later on. And, but I just, man, I've never seen a roster without this many guards. It's really strange. Like you see rosters without bigs, but how the hell do you end up with a roster with no other point guards besides LLS? So he's either going to have to play 40 minutes with like 4 fouls all the time, or I just don't know.
Teams that can press are just going to feast. They're going to force so many live ball turnovers.
Oh, all the time, man. It's going to be insane. Like just go. The scouting report's going to say, just go at it. Try to, like, when LLS is driving, like just take a charge, like get him onto the bench, and then it's just done. All right. He's clearly the X factor. Moving on, we got the Miami Hurricanes, Jim Larinaga. They have a pretty juicy looking roster at first glance. They, came out their pockets. They're, with nil the way it is, they went out and of all the people, and this is not a knock, or I'm not dissing Nigel Pack. I think Nigel Pack is a fantastic basketball player, but of all the players to go out and like literally open up the bag of cash or have a hand a blank check to and say, hey, what's it going to take to get to go here? Because they reported the amount of money, but damn well he's going to be getting more money that they're not talking about. But Nigel Pack, he averaged 17, 4, 2, like shot 44% from long range. Like, yes, he is a good player, no doubt. But of all the options, it just seemed weird to be like blowing up, at the spot and making this much fuss about it, and almost losing them a player in Isaiah Wong. But then I like how they kind of pulled rank and said, okay, bye. And he's like, wait, I was just kidding. So, at first glance, it looks like a great lineup. Isaiah Wong, Jordan Miller, Anthony Walker back. Anthony Walker, I'm not ready to give up on. He was really good 2 years ago in certain spots, fell by the wayside last year, didn't play a lot. I still think there's time for him to develop. Jordan Miller was another one of my low-owned guys last year that just made us a ton of money last year. Profit City. He had some big games, like just 50-point bombs that people were like, whoa, where'd he come from? I love Jordan Miller, and he's still not going to get that much attention this year because Wong's who's still developing, Nigel Pack coming in, and then of course they've got Norchad Omer, who is just a freaking monster. Last year in 30 minutes a game, he averaged 18 and 12, just like a really strong acquisition. That I'm gonna call it an acquisition because it's basically what it is, but I think more so and more important than Nigel Pack. And I think Norchad's going to be this type of guy who he's going to feast on some of these ACC teams that don't have the size needed. Louisville has the size, but whatever. But look at some of the numbers for Norchad: 28% usage rate, 26% shot rate, the fourth best defensive rebounding rate in the country at 32.1%. Which is amazing. 16% offensive rebounding rate, a block rate over 6%, steal rate over 3%. He drew almost 6 fouls per 40. He didn't really take threes, but he shot 62% from the field overall, a lot of bunnies, and a 73% free throw shooter on 145 attempts. So you like to see that. He's not a big-time center or anything, 6'7". He played a lot of 4 and 5 there at Arkansas State. So they'll play a little small ball with him, but he plays much bigger, and he's just an amazing rebounder. So he's the one that I'm super excited about to use. I think that I'm pretty confident. It's technically an up transfer, as you will say, but I think he has the chops to really handle himself in this conference and really beat up on some of the lower end teams and show out against some of the bigger name teams. So that's probably looking like their starting five. You've got some interesting people on the bench. Bensley Joseph, who has shown as a 3-point shooter in the past, somebody who could potentially be used. Harlan Beverly, I believe, will be back. 2 years ago, Beverly was actually a pretty certifiable DFS option that was putting up some decent numbers. So having him back in the mix will be nice. As just an additional piece. He had back surgery last year, so that's always a tricky, proposition. But if he can, get back to 2 years ago form, even like 40 to 50% of the way, that's going to be huge. Top 100 recruit Jack A. Robinson, kind of a multifaceted player that can do a little bit of everything. He redshirted last year. They're pretty high on him. And then, like I said, the emergence, hopefully, of Anthony Walker, who really just played the 14 minutes per game last year. But there were times I got burned playing him because I was really, wanting to hit that game when he did blow up. But, I know he's capable of doing it. And I think playing next to Norchad and kind of this offense that might play a little fast at times, there's going to be opportunities for Walker to get a lot of easy buckets or weak side rebound putbacks that are, the defender's just going to lose sight of him. So I'm fairly high on Walker, and overall this starting five for Miami I think is going to be strong, and I'm not so sure their rotation is going to be super deep, at least initially, just because there's 4 freshmen plus a redshirt freshman coming in. Seeing how that's going to shake out, I think they'll lean on their starting five a lot more, and we saw that last year with Miami. The starters, they played a lot of minutes overall pretty consistently. So I think that's kind of the trademark of Larinaga here. And I think we'll see that and we'll be able to rely on it. Maybe not to the, Ed Cooley school of playing your starters, but definitely a guy that is going to rely on them. You look at Cameron McGusty, 85% of the minutes last year, Isaiah Wong, 84%, Charlie Moore, 81%. So those 3 guys just, rarely left the floor. And then Jordan Miller sitting there at 75%, Sam Warburg at 71%. So between that Walker and spot, there was a bunch of different guys that rotated in, but the 3 or 4 guys really just were in the game the entire time in different intervals. So Hurricanes dropping money out in the open because it's legal now. There's going to be some nil guidelines here eventually, but they took full advantage and came away with 2 pretty good transfers. So how do you value them pretty high? Do you think they make a repeat in the tournament, making a deep run, which was, one of their best seasons in recent memory, maybe even ever? Or do you think they kind of fall back into mediocrity?
No, I mean, they got the guards. I mean, it was crazy that the Miami billionaire who owns Life Wallet literally just dished out $400K a year at least to get Nigel back there. I thought that was crazy, but
Yeah,
that's the world we live in now. I mean, until they regulate it or do anything with it, it's free game. And Nigel, go get your bag. But Nigel Pack, Isaiah Wong, Jordan Miller, those 3 are going to be on the court a ton, and it's figuring out what we're going to do with Anthony Walker, AJ Casey. Jackie Robinson, now that he's healthy at 6'5", I think can definitely really help them on the wing. And Norchad Omer. The one thing with Omer, I saw that he did tend to struggle in his 2 games against high major opponents. He struggled with Tech, who everybody struggles with. And then he struggled against his other high major opponent his freshman year. what was it? What was the team he played? Illinois, he struggled a little bit, but honestly, his rates just were so great, and they definitely going to need some help on the glass with a ton of 3 guard lineups because it's like the way with Shigwe, where Shigwe is going to get every single rebound, so we're all just going to run and leak out, and just know Shigwe is going to get the rebound. They can do the same kind of thing with Norchet Amir, where they know he's going to gobble up, every rebound, and they can leak out. It's going to be a really fun team to watch. And I circled the game, in their non-conference. They get Providence, and what is a neutral, but it's Mohegan, which is going to be a de facto home game for Providence. They have them winning by 1, but I kind of right now I like that Providence team to eke that one out. But that's going to be a really good one at Mohegan. And then they play Rutgers at home, a little bit of UCF in an in-state rivalry. And that's pretty much it in Vermont. Like, there's non-conference is soft, which is kind of bothering me. And then I forgot the other 2 teams in Mohegan, but yeah, I mean, considering how good they were last year and what they returned, I was hoping they would, challenge themselves a little bit more, but it doesn't seem to be the case. But overall, yeah, I mean, I like Larinaga's style. I love that 4 guard lineup. And now they have a little more size and they bring in 4 freshmen. It remains to be seen how much we get from Ire at 6'11", 115 on 247. Christian Watson at 6'6", at 3-star recruit. I think they can go 7, 8, 9 deep if they want to. I think they're going to stick around 7, which seems like the case. I like this team a good amount. I think this is a middle of the pack team in the ACC with excellent guards who, like we saw last year, they can make that deep run. They lost to Kansas in the Elite Eight, and then they lost to a tough Duke team that didn't really match up well in the ACC tournament. So teams with that 4 and 5 last year, like a Bancaro at the 4, which is a mismatch nightmare. I mean, most teams pretty much struggle with that. They're going to struggle with that again, but I think Omir can really help offset that. And then Walker, Casey, they have some size this year to bang a little bit more than they did last year. Last year, they gave up, 53% of their 2-point makes, which is 300th in the country in 2-point field goal defense. And then they really struggled on the glass. If they can improve on the glass this year, with Omer coming in, I think this team can actually take a step up because their veteran guards, outside of losing Charlie Moore, everyone's back, and then Harold Beverly can come in and run the point some too, even if he's the 6th man or if he starts. I'm fine with either one. I like this team a lot. I question a little bit their non-conference, but in terms of fantasy and in terms of their roster on paper, there's no reason why this isn't a top 5 team in the ACC.
Agreed. All right, moving on, we have the North Carolina Tar Heels. Hubert Davis has done a great job, and just real quick, I'll have you do the deep dive on this too. They're bringing back R.J. Davis, Caleb Love, who just deserves a lot more respect than he got from his own fans at North Carolina, who wanted to see him gone at the beginning of last year. And I even tweeted, I said, I'd gladly take him in Washington, but he, proved himself more than enough last year. Leaky Black and Armando Bacot, having those 4 back is great. They really just lose Brady Manick, and they're going to fill, and obviously Kerwin Walton and Dawson Garcia, but Manick, the main guy there that was responsible for their deep run. But they bring in Pete Nance to fill that same role, and it's not quite a carbon copy, but it's pretty damn close in terms of their numbers. Nance was hitting around 44% of his triples, average 15 and 6. Like, he's going to flourish next to Bacot and Black because Black doesn't need to score, as we know. Bacot's going to command double teams because most of the time you go one-on-one with him, he's just going to score. So Nance is going to have that opportunity like Manick, and if he can hit those threes at a high level and just he's going to have some really big games, and this is a perfect situation for him. Bench wise, Seth Trimble comes in, freshman, like him for the future. Puff Johnson, who I'd love to see kind of have a breakout potentially, and then you have the Dontrez Styles, DeMarco Dunn, Justin McCoy group of kids who are talented, but kind of like Kerwin Walton, they're not going to play a lot, and I'm actually surprised. Well, I guess I'm not surprised that they didn't leave because they're going to be a winning team, but I just don't know what their minutes are going to shake out. I think Hubert Davis is pretty much comfortable with his short rotation and run his starters into the ground, and I think as DFS players we're happy with that as well. But what do you think, man? Because this is a really probably as good as any starting 5 in the country. And as always, it comes down to if they stay healthy, then they're good. But if they have an injury, foul trouble, like what are we going to do here with this bench, and who are they going
Yeah,
to
I
rely on?
mean, I think this team is a little bit deeper than last year. I think Seth Trimble's going to help a lot. You also bring in Jalen Washington at 6'9". I mean, he's just going to be, Baycott gets into foul trouble. He might spell him a little bit here and there. You got Styles. I think that this team can go 8 deep, 9 deep if they want to. It's funny because on so many other programs, and these 4-star kids would just come in right away and play 15,
Mhm.
18 minutes. But here they're just, it's not the case. And like we saw last year, Hubert loved running those starters. I mean, granted, all he had was Puff Johnson off the bench because Don Trezin wasn't really ready to go last year. I'm hoping that he made an improvement. DeMarco Dunn started for them in their exhibition. They blew out, who'd they blow out? Johnson C. Smith, like 101-40. I mean, this team looked great. Baycott had 20 rebounds like in 24 minutes. It's just on paper, this team is great. And then, you lose Brady Manick, you lose Dawson Garcia transferring midway, and then you bring in Pete Nance, who looked great, played the most minutes in the exhibition, took 13 shots. He can shoot the three, like you said, at over 40% clip. He was just at Northwestern, where they just don't find a way to win games in the Big Ten. Now he's coming into a team where he doesn't have to be the focal point of every, coach's scheme in the Big Ten. And now he can just, run free and play. And now, he's surrounded by RJ. He's got Caleb Love, all guys who can make shots, can create for him. And then you got Baycott to clean up every miss. So this team looks great on paper. They got a couple of awesome non-conference matchups. They get Indiana in a true road game at Assembly Hall, which is one that's going to be circled for me on a big Wednesday. Ohio State on a neutral, and then they get Michigan and a semi-home, which is going to be an awesome game too. They're projected to actually lose that game at Assembly Hall, and they're projected to lose that true road game, the first game in the ACC against Virginia Tech, which shows you how good, the Hokies can be, especially at Blacksburg. But, yeah, I mean, listen, there's not really much to talk about. We watched them all tournament long. They were freaking awesome. Hubert Davis is going to have them ready to go. I love their combo of RJ and Caleb Love. They both can play in ball screen. They both can shoot over the top of defenses. They're both, elite McDonald's All-American type guards that came out, and they both play well together. You throw in the Swiss Army knife with Leaky, and then you can mix in a little Trimble. You can mix in a little Styles. And then you got Baycott. I mean, Baycott still rolled his ankle in the national championship game and still balled out. It's like this dude's an Iron Man. I just love this team. Once they got Pete Nance, I was just like, wow, this team literally just looks ready to go to repeat. So I think this team deserves every bit of, number one in the preseason. Armando Baycott deserves to be preseason player of the year. And it's awesome because Armando Baycott finally, it's going to be second year, same thing with Shigwe. They have no bigs like a Culliver, like Walker Kessler. There's nobody in their way. It's just them, and they're going to freaking eat. And it's going to be exciting to watch. I think this team's every bit of being number one in the conference and, top 5 in the country.
Yeah, this is Baycott's year to kind of cement his legacy as up there with Psycho T and some of these other legendary Tar Heels players that brought home a title. So definitely interested to see how it pans out. In that exhibition game, RJ Davis did sit at a sprained right hand, but preliminary, so it's cool to see that Dunn got some minutes there. I'm really was hoping to see Dunn and Styles play a little bit more, but we'll see. I think Seth Trimble is the one. He's going to be the main bench piece for them that they can rely on if things get dicey. Caleb Love hit 4 of 9 triples in that exhibition as well, so the 3-point shooting staying good for him there as he improved as the season went on. That's what we need to see out of Caleb.
Awesome high volume shooter.
Yeah. All right, moving on, we got the NC State Wolfpack. Coming into the season, the Wolfpack, they weren't really a talked about squad, and it was always the Kevin Keats, I can't, he's gonna screw us over, and he's got these weird rotate, and he just is a bad coach and blah blah blah. And there was a lot of talk about Darian Seabrun when there was any Wolfpack talk, and there wasn't a lot of talk, at least early on, about Turk-Avian Smith. And Turk was a guy that we latched onto quickly. He reminded me so much of Cam Thomas. And of course, Cam Thomas was like auto roster, but Turk gets peripherals, which Cam really didn't. He averaged 4 rebounds, had a couple assists, over a steal, hit about 37% of his threes, 40% of his shots. And he's just, it's amazing that he came back. I think it's wise because he's going to be able to raise his stock a little bit more, and he's going to be a phenomenal player. And Keats, it looked like Keats thought he was going to leave because he went out and landed a bunch of guys in the transfer portal, right? Jarkel Joyner to be the main guard coming in. Jack Clark, who 6'8", but he plays a lot of kind of tweener guard forward. And DJ Burns, Dusan Mohoric, Greg Gant, like he kind of filled up the lineup with these different transfer guys, and then comes out that Turk's going to return. So it's like a big sigh of relief for him because he's going to have a huge focal point of the offense. And I think that Turk's going to have one of those seasons that's just going to be legendary for, not maybe necessarily in the actual record books or anything, but one of those DFS seasons where it's like, if he's not priced at $9K, then you're just going to roster him every single slate and watch him put up these huge numbers. He had a couple of clunkers at times last year, but as a youngster, you expect that. I don't foresee the sophomore slump coming for him. I think he's just going to come right in and just ball out from the day one. Shot rate was about 30% last year. Do I think that can go higher? I do. Not necessarily like a Marcus Howard level type of crazy shot rate, but I think it's going to be quite high. I do think Joyner and Casey Morsell and guys like that, Jack Clark can also score, but you look at their bench, Ebenezer Duana was playing too many minutes last year. He's much better as a kind of bench big that can come in and block shots. Having him play 25, 26 minutes, just he's too limited offensively. Breon Pass is kind of not really my cup of tea either. Ernest Ross has shown ability to play, but this is a team, again, that has a lot of bigs coming off the bench. Greg Gant, not a big offensive force. Dusan Mohoric, also not an offensive force, but he put up some decent games rebounding the basketball. And DJ Burns is a kind of a tweener big that can score. Jack Clark, a tweener big that can score. But at the end of the day, I think Turk's just going to be shooting at a very high volume. I think Jarkel is going to set him up very well and put the ball in his hands a lot, not allow Turk to initiate the offense as much, play off the ball a lot more where he's more comfortable and he can hit shots for us. So this team is built around Turk. He's going to have a high level of shots, and it's really obvious that he's going to put up a season and potentially be the ACC player of the year. I'm that confident regardless of what ends up happening for NC State. Now, looking around it, I think they actually have a chance to defend a lot better and maybe even have a chance to replace, losing Darian Sebron is tough. Jericho Helms, that's tough. Cam Hayes and Jalen Gibson, not as tough. But I think the addition of Joyner and Clark is actually being way under talked about. And both of those guys have the opportunity to, as at COVID year seniors, maybe not statistically put up these huge numbers, but they'll affect the game in other ways and really kind of set the table for Turk and allow him to do what he does best, and that's score the basketball. So this Wolfpack team is really interesting. I think that I'm going to have a hard time not just jamming Turk into every single lineup, but I think there's some, volume or value here that we can have as well. Other Wolfpack guys over the years have been viable in this particular offense. Say what you will about Keats, but he generates fantasy viability for us. And I think a guy like Jack Clark might end up being a usable fantasy guy throughout the season. So what do you think about the Wolfpack here? Without Turk, they were destined for the bottom of the barrel in the conference, but with his surprise return, some people have him kind of as maybe even a mid-tier, ACC team.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they got one of the best guard tandems in Smith and Joyner for sure. We saw Turk was perfect for fantasy, man. He would chuck those threes, took 10 in the exhibition. He gets a ton of steals. He's gonna have the ball in his hands. He got 7 assists. As DraftKings, we don't really worry about the turnovers as much. And then these complementary pieces, like Jack Clark was, the stats didn't jump off the page, at LaSalle, but 25 minutes in the exhibition, took 10 shots, 3 triples, got 9 rebounds, blocked a couple of shots. I mean, depending on how they price him, I mean, he looks great playing that 4 role. Yep. And then Dusan Mahovic, I mean, Utah played like 13 guys last year, so his minutes seem pretty capped. The issues with NC State defensively last year, obviously we lost Manny Bates, and that really, put a hurt in their interior, and Dewana and these guys had to, bang down low. So we were just targeting them every single time. I think the defense can definitely improve in the 246 overall adjusted efficiency on KenPom. 305th in the paint. They gave up 300th in threes. I mean, this team was just not defending anybody last year, and they were speeding everybody up. So it was wonderful. They just didn't turn the ball over on offense. They were actually pretty good. I was kind of hoping maybe Sebron would come back. I know he signed his two-way deal in the G League. If he would have came back, this team would have actually been, middle of the pack. But you bring in Casey. I like Casey Morcell. I was hoping that he would take the next step from Virginia. He looked really good from when he passes the eye test, but I haven't seen enough from him outside of making a couple of shots. But it's going to be tough. I mean, this team, DJ Burns is a role big. I was hoping, the former 4-5-star kid from Providence, Greg Gant, would take a next step at some point in his career, but he hasn't. LJ Thomas looked decent. He's a 160, only freshman they brought in their class. This team's, they have more size down low to Banks. I think they'll be a little bit better, at least, throwing in Dewana just to foul as opposed to actually playing meaningful minutes. But yeah, I mean, listen, you have elite guards in Smith and Joyner, so they'll be in, pretty much every game at home in the sense that they can beat anybody, but they go on the road, they could lose to anybody too. I mean, this team, if they don't defend, they're going to get run over. So, I like this team. I think they're better than the bottom for sure. Turk Smith alone is just better than the bottom. So I think I would have them in that 9 range, 8 range. Maybe they're lucky they squeeze into the NIT. They get Kansas on a neutral. We get to watch Turk Smith try to, carve up Bill Self in his first game back. And then they get, pretty much Vanderbilt on a neutral. And that's really it in the non-conference. Everything else is soft. So I don't really see how this team's going to make a lot of noise outside of maybe winning against these cupcakes early and then, in for a wake-up call in the ACC. But, again, you got Turk and Joyner. I mean, they're going to take a majority of the shots. And then if Jack Clark can play inside out and run a lot of 1-4 ball screens with them, I think they'll be okay in terms of offense. It's just a matter of how much we can buy in defensively, maybe without a true shot blocker on the roster.
Yeah, that's definitely – there's going to be some questions they have to answer, but yeah, I'm glad to see Jack Clark kind of perform in that exhibition and maybe get some attention because he was way better than I think his season long stats say, and late season, like February to March, he was putting up some 30 bangers, like real live scoring 30 and 10 type games against like Duquesne's and St. Joe's. I know it's Duquesne's and St. Joe's, but he has that in his bag.
8-10's respectable.
Yeah, so I don't know. I like Jack Clark quite a bit, but other kid to maybe look at is Ernest Ross. I did see he scored 13 in their exhibition, and he's got some maybe some Darian Sebron like ascension in him as well. But at the end of the day, it's still Keats coach team, so we'll see. Yeah. All right, Notre Dame, Mike Bray, in just 22, 23 seasons. My God, just been around forever. This Notre Dame team has some solid pieces coming in, some solid pieces returning. I think that their rotation, was pretty short last year, which made for an easy, time of it for DFS. Lead us off here. Do you see it being kind of a more of a shallow rotation again and top heavy, or do you think more balanced this year?
I think we're still going to get a lot of good guard play. I mean, we lost Blake Wesley to the NBA, and then they bring in JJ Starling, number 21, 5-star recruit combo guard, which is going to be great for my man Mike Bray to, relieve one first-round pick in the NBA for maybe potentially another one coming out of La Lumiere, which we've seen a ton of star guards come out of. They also bring in Marcus Hammond, the transfer from Niagara, who put up like 17, 18 a game there and got a lot of high major looks. So I think he's going to be able to come in and be a contributor. Along with, Trey Wirtz was good at times off the bench last year, 4-star kid. Graduate transfer. Cormac Ryan from Stanford was a really good three-point shooting guard, really heady, high IQ guy. And, we saw Leshevsky and Dane Goodwin play really well for this team. I think this team is going to be in that similar boat as last year in the sense that they're going to go with, a lot of 4-guard lineups. I last year they struggled, playing Atkinson and Leshevsky together. We don't really have that problem since we lose Atkinson, we lose Wesley, we lose Prentice Hub. So I think that this team has potential. I really like their guards. I like them another year older. I think they were picked 9th in the conference. I kind of see them I think that this team's a little better than an NC State team. I think as a whole, I think this is more like an 8 seed, maybe 7 at best. I think they've got some potential here. They have a lot of guys who can make shots, which I love, and they have good guards. So I'm excited about that. And Mike Bray's a solid coach. He's been that way for a long time. So they played their exhibition game the other day, and they've won by 15 against LA Xavier. So the starting five, JJ Starling came in right away and played 32 minutes, which we love. He didn't shoot it well. It was 1 of 7, 0 of 5. Going to be some growing pains playing against grown men when you come from the high school ranks. Marcus Hammond, the Niagara transfer, came in right away and played 32 minutes. We love that. Cormac Ryan played 32 minutes. Leshevsky played 30, and Jane Goodwin played 28. So the starters seem pretty clear here. And then the first guy off the bench is going to be Trey Wirtz. They're looking like they're going to go pretty much 6 deep here. And then Van Allen Lubin played 15 minutes. I love that for DFS. So from DFS side, I love it a lot. So there's no complaints here. They got a ton of guards who are going to chuck. They didn't shoot it well from 3. They shot 7 of 26, but they have better shooters than that. And I think it's just, first game of the season, getting some rust off. It's just a matter of if Mike Bray's team can defend. Last year, they actually weren't where they were pretty good, 70th in KenPom. They just play slow. They play deliberate because they have to, because when you only have 6, 7 guys you can play, you can't run and gun like St. John's. You're going to run out of gas. So that's the only thing that temper my expectations. But if these guys are all going to play 30 minutes and we're going to get their stats per 40 on a nightly basis, I love it.
Yeah. The last 2 seasons, Brett, they've run a 7-man rotation, so it won't be big. It probably won't be any bigger than that. So no. you can rely on that for sure.
Yeah, they don't have the talent to not. So, and then and Van Allen Lubin's top 80 kid. So I think they're gonna go 7 deep with Wirtz and Lubin off the bench, and that's gonna be plenty for them. I like their team. I think they're gonna struggle inside. Leshevsky being the 5 for them, I think that's gonna be. At times is going to be an issue defensively in terms of giving up some offensive rebounds and his ability to bang down there. But it's also going to be a strength when he gets to pull the 5 out on the perimeter when they pick and pop, because he's a pretty damn good 3-point shooter, and you have to respect his shot. So I think it's going to work both ways for them. Non-conference, they get a lot of cupcakes early. They don't play anybody till Michigan State at home, which they're projected to win. I'm not that high on Mich State this year, so I do think that Notre Dame can pull that one out in South Bend. They get my Marquette team in the Big East. I think that they're not very good, so I definitely think they're going to win that game at home. And then they get a bad Georgia team. So they're getting these Power 6 teams, but they're, not very good outside of Michigan State to be, maybe they're going to get 1 or 2 teams that are going to be NCAA tournament type teams when it comes all said and done, which might hurt them. But I think that this is a bubble team in the NCAA. If not, maybe an NIT team, depending on if they can stay healthy. Because, when you run a 7-man rotation and one guy goes down, you really feel it. So I like this team overall. Especially in DFS, man, I love when we know where the minutes are going. And then I think that this team is KenPom has them at 43. I kind of have them in that mid-50s range. I think that kind of feels about right. But outside of that, I like the team. I like Bray. I think this team's got a chance to win, 20 games because the non-conference is so soft. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent. Even going back to the last couple of seasons with John Mooney, they didn't run a very deep rotation. So we can count on that to be the case here again this year. And in that exhibition, Dane Goodwin, he was solid, 21 and 10. I think he's going to kind of act as a bit of an alpha until Starling gets things going. And Goodwin's he's that very underrated fantasy option and has been for a couple of years now. So just depends, because he's, sometimes he's priced at 5K and he's great. And then he has a, 3-game stretch and it's like he's priced to 7K and it's not so great. So playing next to a high volume flamethrower like Marcus Hammond and a potential star in Starling is only going to help him. All right, moving on. This is a deep conference, or a lot of teams. Pittsburgh, Jeff Capel has, been trying his best to keep guys to stay. He's been an excellent recruiter. He just has not been able to keep anyone that from transferring, leaving, whatever. Dior Johnson, who is a kid that had actually agreed to do the show stills, but he, when he decided to leave Oregon, he kind of didn't do it anymore. And then he, of course, goes to Pittsburgh, and then now there's some issues. So he's not going to be around really. And that's sad because Dior is a kid. He's a nice kid. I like talking to him, and I really had high hopes for him, but sometimes things like this happen. So it looks like they're going to run with a kind of everyman type of lineup. Guys like Nelly Cummings, who had 15 points per game last year, shot 36 from long range. Blank Hinson comes in after, God, it seems like he's played for a million teams. Greg Elliott comes in as kind of a flamethrower from Marquette. So they've gotten some shooting here to surround kind of the breakout star of the team last year, John Hughley, who averaged 15 and 8. I only suspect his numbers to go up. Playing next to Hinson, who's kind of a junkyard dog type player from his time at Iowa State and Ole Miss. Just a matter of him staying healthy. And then they throw into the mix there Jamarius Burton, who stays aboard there in the guard rotation. And then finally, maybe a healthy Nike Sibande, who has shown his ability to knock down threes if he can stay healthy. So this is one of those rosters that's not super high upside for me, but there's some pieces here. The DS Graham, got the brothers there, both basically 7-footers with Hughley. There's a lot of upside with those bigs and being able to surround them with shooters. So I do like what he's had here on paper, and if he can keep this group together, but it's still to me not enough to replace the Femi Odekale, Ethio Horton, Mo Gay kind of group. I think Mo Gay was a lot better than people gave him credit for, and he took some pressure off of Hughley. If they can't get that kind of production out of DS Graham brothers, I think Hughley could actually struggle a little bit, seeing some additional double teams and stuff like that. But this team, and it's got some pieces for DFS purposes that I think are good, because I don't expect anyone to be priced that high except for maybe Hughley. And then if they go off of Cummings' numbers, from his time at Colgate, they may price him a little too high to use initially. But a guy like Greg Elliott will probably come into it at min price, and he could easily come in there and drop like a 20-point real game the way they're talking, because they want him to shoot the ball and they're looking for offense from him, especially with what's going on with D.R. Johnson now. So what do you make of Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean, obviously when they got Dior, I got hyped up, man. I love watching his tapes growing up, when he was in 9th, 10th grade and he had his little mixed tapes up. He was like a top 5 recruit at the time in his class, falling off a little bit to like the 40s, but who cares? We knew that if Dior was on his team, he was going to make the all-rookie team, potentially could be one of the best overall players in the class as a freshman. But again, aggravated assault charges and the unknowns stink. They do bring in, Nelly Cummings, Blake Hinson, Greg Elliott, all capable transfers. I really like Blake Hinson. I mean, he balled out in the exhibition, 29 points. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy, which stinks, but it looks like he's going to start off healthy. Iowa State transfer, there was like a slate 2 years ago, came in out of nowhere in like February or January. He was like $3K. I got to play him. I think he was on Auburn, one of those SEC teams, and he hit. And I knew he was good. I knew he had potential, but this is like the perfect fit for him too. Like he's outside of, Hughley going to be playing some inside out. And we know we don't really want too much of Jameis Burton shooting the rock. Outside of Elliott Cummings, I mean, Hinson's going to have every opportunity to be a 3-and-D wing for this team. If we can get anything out of Sibande, Nate Santos got some minutes, took 7 threes in the exhibition. I mean, it seems just not like, anything special on paper. I do like you said, like he couldn't keep Champagne, he couldn't keep any of these guys to stay. And then, we get the unknown with the Diaz brothers from IMG Academy. Both guys are 6'11" with some size. Both seem skinny, about 200 pounds. So like Hughley's going to have, he's going to have some issues in the paint, because Mo Gee was awesome, man. Coming from Stony, he would pick and pop, shoot the three, block shots, switch on defense. He was great for that team. Just stinks that he just couldn't, they didn't win enough games to highlight how good he was towards the back end of conference play last year. But like you said, I mean, Greg Elliott's going to have every opportunity to take shots at Marquette. Shaka had him coming off the bench. He'd play about 10, 15 minutes. If he was playing St. John's at home, he'd get 25 minutes and light us up. But outside of that, he would only play about like 10, 12 minutes a game. He'd get his threes off. And some slates, I mean, he's dropped 20 real points in a couple of games. He's going to be, probably starting at the 2-3 for them. I definitely think that he's got some potential here. But this team's going to play a lot of 4 guard lineups, I think, too. I mean, I don't with if we consider Hinson a guard, which I do. So I'm not. I mean, like I said, they're pretty like 13th in the conference. Like, there's nothing crazy to get excited about. I did find it exciting that they were actually projected to beat West Virginia at home on Kempon by 1. Just pretty good for them. And they get Michigan on a neutral. NC State early in conference play. They get Vandy on the road in that tough environment playing, in Vandy with their crazy court. But this team not playing anybody either in the non-conference. Not really anything too exciting. They'll probably reel off a couple of wins. But these are the type of teams like Pittsburgh last year lost so many cupcakes, man. They would lose to like the worst teams, lose to the Citadel at home by 15. They'd lose to UMBC. They like this team could lose to like Tennessee Martin opening night, and I wouldn't be surprised. So nothing really crazy to get excited about here, especially losing Dior. That was really like the main reason I wanted to tune in to watch them. And then I was just so deflated last year. They beat my Johnnies at the Garden when Champagne had COVID. I was just so depressed. But yeah, nothing crazy here. Pittsburgh's Pittsburgh. Jeff Capel, is he on the hot seat?
Yeah, he keeps recruiting well, and then, like you said, can't keep some. So he definitely needs to have a decent season. He'll probably get a little bit of a break for Dior being out. But last year, the guard play of Pittsburgh was just so rough, and that the group that they were going with, it wasn't healthy, and Otakale was in and out of the lineup, and Horton was in and out of it's just they are much better, I think, as even with Dior not being around now. Like Nelly Cummings, he's looked pretty good in their 2 exhibition games. You mentioned Hinson, he's playing pretty damn well in the exhibition. Burton at least can be adequate if he's not relied on to shoot a lot. And then, Elliott coming in as a gunner. So I think their guard play is good enough to where they should be able to win some of these games. And if he can just have a decent record, or at least keep them from, being 11-21, then maybe he'll stick around for another season, because he does recruit well, and he's got some solid players here. And I really like the way it sets up these pieces around Hughley. It's kind of that, old school, get your big and then surround him with shooters type lineup. And I think this might be able to work. And then just harp a little bit about what Cable's lost over the years. He had a team with Xavier Johnson, Trey McGowans, Justin Champagne, Audis Tony, like all those guys together. They couldn't win games. For some reason, they were 16-17. A couple years before that, he had Marcus Carr, who has been in college for a long ass time, played for Pittsburgh. and there's just, it's crazy to see what this team has. Shamil Stevenson, Parker Stewart, like he's had so many different players on this team that they should have won a lot more than they did. And to be 16-17 with that group, man, that's rough. All right. So another team, just another, out there, possibly bottom feeder squad. Moving on, we have Syracuse. Jim Boeheim approaching his impossibly long stint of almost 50 seasons. This is crazy that they had, it's one of the few times, I think first ever, that Syracuse didn't turn themselves an above 500 season, 15-16. I think I remember reading that was the first time that ever happened. So got to rectify that. Looking at it, my man Joey Girard, I think this is the season we've been waiting for years. He scoring champ in high school, setting records, and came into the, college kind of on a short leash. We saw him kind of ball out at first. Then, Boeheim, nope, you're going to be benched because you're turning it over too much. Now he runs into his senior year. Boeheim's kids are gone. There's a youngster at the point guard position here, and Judah Mintz, who's potentially going to be a star. It allows Joey Girard to move off ball, though, where he's much more comfortable when Joey's got to run the offense. It's just not good for his shooting and scoring. He's in his head a little bit too much. Allow him to play off the ball and just do what he does best, and that's score the rock. I think they'll let Benny Williams play a lot more this year. At least I hope so. I've been excited about him. So I think year 2 is going to be some nice things for him. Jesse Edwards returns as probably, their best big or best player overall. He was a DFS darling last year for like 2 or 3 weeks straight. He was just mega chalk. He never failed. He was going 6X plus, and I think it's going to be a case where he's going to touch the ball a lot and score a lot. And then you've got, Samir Torrance, who's going to play a lot in this team as well. Boeheim's been selling pretty hard on him. And then you've got a myriad of freshmen and Judah Mintz, who's the best of the bunch. speaking of bunch, they have Chris Bunch, Quadir Copeland, Malik Brown, Peter Carey, and Justin Taylor. So a pretty young group here, but none of them are really that heralded outside of mints. Like a bunch of 105, 124, 220, like guys like that are probably just bench pieces. And depth, and probably not playing a lot. Syracuse, we know, usually plays their starters a lot of minutes as well. I'm looking here, and I'm on paper, I'm seeing like a 7-man rotation. I could see it even being lower than that. But one thing I do know is that Joe Girard is going to have a massively high scoring season that I've been waiting for 4 years now, and we finally get to see it. So I'm excited because Buddy Buckets is gone. Girard's going to be taking all of those shots, all of them. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, Gerard's going to play a ton of minutes at that 2-1 spot with Judah. You're going to get Benny Williams, Jesse Edwards in the front court, and then mix in some Chris Bell, some Samir Torrance, and smaller lineups, maybe some Copeland, Malik Brown. But, yeah, I mean, there's really 4 spots that are going to be pretty much locked up in this offense. I mean, and then you get Jesse Edwards to be in the middle of the 2-3. I think that this team, 54th on KenPom last year, really struggled to defend, man. They just 207th in defense, couldn't rebound it out of the zone, and then they couldn't run. And then they were just giving up a ton of points in the paint, man. So it was really tough for them. I don't really see how the defense is going to get that much better because it's pretty much the same squad with less depth. So Cupcake City to begin the year, and then they get, Illinois on the road. They get Georgetown at home, it's another cupcake, and then they're playing at the Barclays, I think, for that classic. I think they're playing thought it was Temple, but I guess not. Maybe they're not at the Barclays Classic. I thought they were playing them. But the non-conference, they are playing. They're playing Richmond at the Barclays. That's what it was. And then St. John's is playing Temple, and then the winners might play each other at the Barclays, which would be nice if my Johnnies could play Cuse. Always a big rivalry game. I usually prefer that one at the Garden, but I'll take it at the Barclays. And then, I mean, listen, it's nice. This is another team in the ACC where we know where the ball's going, and we know that the rotation is going to be short. So I'm excited about that. But outside of that, I think Joe Girard's going to be priced pretty high to begin the year. Same thing with Jesse Edwards. Like, these two guys could be, 7,500, 8K and above, which is going to make it tough. I think Benny Williams is going to be a guy that we can target early. I think last year he was sitting in that 3K range because he wasn't really getting too many minutes. Top 50 recruit. He's got the bungees, can really rebound. 8 rebounds in their exhibition game against New Hampshire. They struggled with New Hampshire too in the second half. New Hampshire outscored them by 6. They kind of ran out of gas because they took out the starters. But, I think that this team is, middle of the pack towards bottom end. It's just a matter of can they defend in that zone? Like, we saw it so many times last year where the guard play of, Miami and these teams like that were just carving that zone up, and then they had to switch and get out of it. And then once Cuse is in man, you have them beat. It's a matter of can they run that zone this year and be, the defensive juggernaut that they've been, top 60 defensive teams. But honestly, Cuse in the last 5 or 6 years hasn't been better than top 70 in defensive efficiency. So we've been able to target them a ton. They've been playing faster too, and then usually that zone is trying to slow you down, but the offense, Cuse likes to run. So, they've been top 100 in average, possession length. So there's going to be a ton of games to target with them coming up. I like this team in terms of we know where the ball's going in DFS. In terms of is this an NCAA tournament team? Honestly, I don't think so, unless they find a way to go at Champaign in the Big Ten ACC and knock off Illinois and, run the table and don't lose to any of these cupcakes like a Georgetown and, like a Colgate or any of these teams early on that are like a 10-point spread or better. And then they got to take care of the cupcakes in the ACC, and they got to win games at home. And they struggled last year winning games at home. So I think that this is probably, an NIT team. I think this team is going to struggle to defend, but they're going to be fun in DFS, which is honestly what I love the most. So I'm excited. I hope they play the Johnnies at the Barclays and the Johnnies beat them, but this is an NIT team, most likely.
It does not sound like too many ACC squads are making the tournament, man. It's not looking like another great year. So, all right, moving on, we have Virginia running out speaking of continuity, they're going to have a lot of it. Kihei Clark is still in damn college, and, part of that championship squad with Kyle Guy and company. It's amazing. Reese Beekman, Armand Franklin, who had his, ups and downs last year. Jaden Gardner after a strong season. Caden Shedrick, Francisco Cafaro and Caden Shedrick kind of taking turns having ham games there at the 5. They're both back. They bring in the Ohio transfer Ben Vanderplas. He's going to, give them that offensive lift that they really needed. They Tane Murray was a guy that they really liked and thought, as a 3-point shooter, he would be able to give them off the bench, productivity. And he did shoot pretty well, but he couldn't defend. And if you can't play solid upper tier defense on this team for this coach, you're not going to see any minutes, and that just happened to be the case. Bennett just he couldn't play him because he was a defensive liability. So I'll be interested to see if a guy like Tane Murray improved on that end, because if he can play some solid minutes off the bench, he's going to be a big time, bench scorer, especially in games when Armand Franklin is struggling. Last year, Franklin, for Indiana a couple years ago, he was such a good DFS play. And then last year he'd be like, 5-4. And it's like, damn, I don't even know if I want to play him, because I don't think he can even get 20 fantasy points. And sometimes he did, but for me, it was really about Reese Beekman. And I was, truly blessed to have the game last year. I have it dialed up because it was like such a good feeling to hit a game like this. But against Louisville, 15 points, 12 rebounds, 5 dimes, 5 steals, just like the most top 1% outcome of all time for Reese Beekman. And I'm really excited to see what he can do here. And as a multi-tier veteran, a guy who is blossoming, offensively now. He's finally able to put the ball in the hoop. He's always been pretty strong in the secondary categories. And he's just a guy that can fill it up. Like, if we can get we doesn't need to be scoring 15, 18 points, but if we can get somewhere in the 11 to 12, 13 range, he's going to do enough rebounding and dropping dimes, he averaged over 2 steals last year, almost a block, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists. So if he can get to that 10 to 12 range in the points scored, he's going to be a 30 fantasy point guy pretty consistently. And I just don't think people are putting that respect on his name just yet. And that's if he's going to be a improved on offense. And that's Virginia team hasn't had an offense since Kyle Guy and company have left. Ty Jerome, D Hunter, like, they need to see Beekman kind of take that next step now. They need to see Armand Franklin really kind of consistently get back to the scorer he was at Indiana, because they have, the bigs that are going to be able to compete on a nightly basis between Shedrick and Cafaro. I think both guys now, another year under their belt, they're going to be able to plays on a consistent basis each night and kind of take care of each other in that regard. If one gets into foul trouble, the next man up. And Jaden Gardner, has been around in the collegiate space for quite a while. Averaged over 15 points per game, 6 rebounds, mostly a consistent option, but he also disappeared at times last year. So nice facelift getting Ben Vanderplas in here, but this team, relying on their vets. Another squad that, a coach with Bennett that with freshmen, he's kind of keeps a tight leash on them. Isaac Trout is a 6'10" forward freshman. I like what he brings to the table. I don't know if he's going to actually get a lot of minutes. And then Isaac McNeely, the 6'4" freshman guard, he's a guy that actually looks like if he can defend early on, will get minutes for Coach Bennett. So we'll have to see there. But I'm all about Reese Beekman here. I'm riding with him a lot as long as he's priced under 7K, or even if he proves to me he can score this year, gets into that mid-7 range, I'll still use him, because that's prime Posh Play of the Day category. Obviously named after Posh Alexander, but when a guy is priced between like 6'8" and 8K, and he's not a popular play, people overlook because of his price, and he's not going to get it done. He's relying too much on this category or this category. And it's like, no, you don't know. This guy is going to do good today. He's got a matchup, or he's emerging as a scorer, whatever it might be. Beekman might have to be a category all his own, but he's going to be a Posh Play of the Day guy a lot this year, I think. So I kind of like Virginia to get back to their scoring ways this season with this roster, especially if Vanderplas can compete against this upper tier competition. And I think, playing for Ohio and some of the guys that he's played with over the years there, and the talent that he was with Sears and, Preston and stuff, and Jason Carter, who is eternal. He had some pretty good games, and he showed that throughout the course of his career. And he didn't have a lot of upper tier competition opportunities, But in a game in early November against Kentucky, he did score 19 real points. So definitely worth mentioning. Had 12 and 7 against LSU. Relatively strong numbers for that competition, I think. So what do you think on Virginia?
I mean, think about it. You get one of the best coaches. You have one of the best coaches in the country in Tony Bennett. You bring back all of your starters from, a third round NIT team, and then you bring in a monster recruiting class with four-star freshmen, three in the top 60, and then you bring in Van Vanderplas, who we saw last year on multiple slates, can pick and pop and really shoot the three, and I think he fits Tony Bennett's system perfectly. I love this team. I think that this team is, could be, 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. They get some awesome games in the non-conference against Baylor on a neutral. They're projected to win all of them too, against Michigan in a true road game in the Big Ten ACC, and then they get Houston at home. 3 awesome games against 3 borderline top 10 to 15 teams in the country. So I think it's going to be an awesome early test for them. They have all the pieces. I love Jaden Gardner. I think we can get it. I think it took them a year for a guy like Jaden Gardner transferring up and getting acclimated into the system. Same thing with Armand Franklin, who showed a lot of flashes at Indiana to go play alongside a Reese Beekman. And then you get, Steady Kihei, who just, always defends, makes the right decision. Like you said, they're going to split Shedrick and Cafaro's minutes, and you got 2 bigs who can really defend and finish around the rim. And then you bring in a Ben Vanderplas, who, even if he comes in and he's a 6th man for this team, he can come in and be instant offense for a team that desperately always needs offense because of the style they play. And then you bring in, 4 top 50, top, 100 kids. Like you said, it's going to be a struggle for Isaac Trout to get on the court, but I mean, there's going to be plenty of games where they're going to blow teams out, and we're going to have opportunities to play these top 60 kids, I think, and get 15, 20 minutes. And then also, I like this kid, Ryan Dunn. He grew up by me at Lehigh. He's from Freeport, New York. He's a big-time kid, 6'8". He's brother with Justin Dunn, the Cincinnati Reds pitcher. He 44% shooter in high school, 6'8", great size. I don't know how much he's going to get in this year, but kind of reminds me of that kind of Miles Kelly type guy. He's like a 4-star kid that is just going to go so under the radar because there's so many of these guys around. But he's a kid down the line that's got a ton of potential. But I really like this team. I mean, they have veteran leadership. They have a great coach. They can go 8, 9, 10 deep if they want to. And they're going to get a ton of marquee games in the non-conference to bolster their resume. I just don't. I really like this team. I think this is a really good, top 3 team, and that has a potential to be a dark horse to win the ACC.
Yeah, I like that. I think that if ever there was a year for them to get back into the tournament and possibly make a run, it's with this group here. So, yeah, I if the freshmen can give them anything, Bennett's one of those guys who keeps them on a short leash, then that'll make their upside that much higher. But even if they just roll the 6, 7 guys and the veterans only and can get a little something out of Tane Murray, they're still probably a 2nd round team at worst. All right, moving right along, we have a couple teams left. Virginia Tech Hokies. This is a team that I am pretty high on overall, and I'm pretty sure it sounds like you are as well. Some pieces here that are returning, a couple of new players, and overall a tough, hard-nosed roster that I think can definitely replicate some of the success they've seen some surprising success that they've seen over the years. So start us off here with the Hokies. What do you like, and where do you see them going?
Yeah, so Hokies last year were great. I mean, Mike Young has done a seamless job to replace Buzz. They lose to Texas in a tough game where I know you had them projected to go pretty far. You took them in our serious draft, a couple of the guys, and I know we love Justin Mutz and company. They play slow. They play deliberate. They're a really good defensive team, and they really grind you out. They bring in, a top 60 combo guard in Rodney Rice, who I think can come in and really be effective for them. They bring in a couple of other 3-star kids and Patrick Wessler and MJ Collins, who, probably be guys we're going to talk about in the future. And then they bring in 3 transfers. They bring in John Camden, who couldn't get on the court over at Memphis. They can bring in Grant Bassel, who we saw in the NCAA tournament against Arizona, who can stretch it out, make shots. Not the most athletic guy, below the rim type guy, but a really good pick and pop big who can rebound and run the floor. And I think will definitely give them some help. And then they still return, our boy Sean Padula, we loved last year. He just couldn't get on the court, couldn't get enough minutes. They got Darius Maddox back, Basso. They got our boy Justin Mutz. I mean, I really like this team. I think they have some, good veterans to mix in with a good recruiting class. So I'm pretty high on them. I mean, losing our boy Kiva Luma is going to be, a tough pill to swallow with his ability to play inside and out, and we love targeting him on slates. But I think Justin Mutz has a chance to be, a second team All ACC type guy this year, and then we're going to see the next step from a Darius Maddox. We're going to and Sean Padula. I think they can come and step in and be really effective right away. And then you mix in, Rodney Rice, you mix in Hunter Couture, who was a great shooter last year, blew up on some slates, and he's going to be able to stretch the floor and allow Justin Mutz to play that kind of hybrid four where he had that triple-double against Cuse, which you hyped up. I remember that. And then you mix in Grant Bassel, who can play on the perimeter. I think this team's got a lot of moxie this year to be a borderline, 10 seed, 11 seed, somewhere in that range in the NCAA tournament. They're non-conference, not the greatest non-conference in the world. I mean, they play Minnesota at home, which I don't think will be any good. They're going to play a Dayton team that's going to be pretty good this year, I definitely think. And then they play Oklahoma State on a neutral, who we were kind of middle of the pack on. So, I mean, the non-conference could be a little bit better, but in terms of the pieces that they do have, the returners and the guys that they had off the bench that had limited production because of the guys who were playing ahead of them, I think that there's definitely some potential here for them to, win 20 games again and be a borderline NCAA team. So I'm pretty high on them. I like them. I think they're probably like sixth, I think, in the ACC, if I had to guess, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and they, almost unexpectedly, Kiva Luma, when he was at Wofford, he had his moments, but he's like a role playing guy for them, and then he transfers up and just becomes like this not a star, but like this productive guy that you can rely on, and that 15-7 they're definitely going to miss that. Naheem Aline, goes off, and they'll need to replace his scoring Storm Murphy. Just a solid player, but I think, upside wise, we're looking at Padula, to replace that pretty easily when it's all said and done if he reaches his upside. And David Angessen, who we talked about yesterday, that transferred out. So losing those pieces, yes, but they bring back a nice nucleus. Padula, I know majority of the people were really high on him because of his point guard ability and initiating his offense and what he can do. I was a pretty high on Darius Maddox last year. He was always cheap. He was starting to get more and more minutes as the season went on, and I kind of noticed that as being one of the primary bench pieces. And once the calendar turned into February, he got consistent 17 to 20 minutes, and then as they inched into March, he was playing early to mid 20 minutes all the time. Had a game against North Carolina where he scored 20 real points, 6 rebounds, 4 for 5 from long range. Like he's a 51% free throw shooter, and he had some volume. He took 79 attempts, so not a supreme amount, but for the minutes he was playing initially, that's pretty good. Obviously that number will go down, but if we see him get into the 150 or more range from 3, like he could put up a lot of points in a hurry. And playing with this front court, Justin Mutz, who's a triple-double, machine. He's another guy that I got the benefit of playing. There was a slate where I had like Mutz and Beekman, and they both had like these really ham games together, and Damian Bow too. It was like one of the best, run goods that I had in a while. I know I got super lucky, but I'm a big Mutz guy. I think, with Kiva Luma gone, he's going to see his rebounding numbers sky up. Grant Basile comes in from Wright State. He did average 8.5 rebounds for them, but I don't think that his rebounds will go up in this conference. He did average 18 real points. Like he'll be that kind of finesse big that will score when needed. Justin Mutz can be the one that they're going to rely on to kind of bang down low. He's a little undersized, but I think he's going to get double-digit rebounds a lot this year. And then also the Rice transfer, Miloš Potit, he averaged 13 and 8. So another guy that can kind of bang down there. If they can get anything about the Memphis transfer, John Camden, who never really played for them because of injuries, if they can get something out of Lynn Kidd, who's a 6'10 guy, they got the freshman Patrick Wessler in there, who's 7 feet. Like, they're got some big bodies coming in here. But looking at the rotation on paper, it's another one that I think we'll probably see maybe hit around 8 consistently. Maybe the freshman Rodney Rice, gets in there and gets minutes, but we'll see some inconsistent play at times, I think, from these guys. Like Hunter Couture will have a 35 and then he'll have an 8. But I think Justin Mutz is going to be the guy that we're going to be able to lock in and play a lot, depending on that price. Like, I just don't see him ever getting priced up to 9K, even though he produces at that level a lot of times. He'll probably live in like the 7K range, which I'm fine paying for him on a nightly basis without Kiva Luma. And then at the guards, it'll really depend on what they price Maddox and Padula at. But I have a lot of interest in both, and I'm just super high on Maddox. He's not initiating the offense, but as long as defense gets lazy on him, or they try to double Mutz or Bassell, he's just, if he gets left even a little bit of daylight, he's knocking down a triple. So I'm a big fan of his. No, I do own him in Dynasty. All right, last team here, Wake Forest. Steve Forbes, man, just can't count him out. He's a winner everywhere he goes, ETSU, and already that season with Wake Forest. Like, I never in a million years would have thought that Alondis Williams would become a Conference Player of the Year, especially in the ACC. Jake Laravia had always been a pretty strong asset at his former college, but for him to go to the NBA, that's wild. Losing Alondis Williams, Jake Laravia, Isaiah Mucius, and Dallas Walton, that's a lot. That all 4 of those guys averaged 9 or more points. All of them had 4 or more rebounds. So definitely a lot of replaced production here, but I just can't count out Forbes. Like I said, he's just a winner everywhere he goes. The main returners here, Damari Monsanto, who I think is on breakout watch, played at ETSU with Forbes, had, sat out some injury stuff. He's healthy, he's there. And Davion Williamson. I could see Davion Williamson actually ascend similar to the way, Alondis Williams did, maybe from a lower end role player to a much bigger asset. Don't think he's gonna be Conference Player of the Year or anything, but I think he could definitely build on his 12 and 2 averages from last year. Shot almost 40% from long range. But between him and Monsanto, that's 2 good starting points for Wake Forest. And I'm going to be looking to see where they price Monsanto early, because he's going to be a guy that I think shoots the ball a metric fuck ton. He's just going to be a really nice play. Tyree Appleby comes in from Florida. That's a really good piece. Tough nose, can play defense. Can initiate the offense, can get guys around him, the ball, and just makes everyone around him better. Andrew Carr, a transfer from Delaware. You guys might not know a lot about him. Averaged 10 and 5, moderate numbers as a 6'10 kid. Shot about 41% from long range, 57% on 2-point field goals. And then Jao Atuka, who was a 15-point per game scorer last year for Marist. So those are some solid pieces they bring in. Some other secondary pieces like Davion Bradford from Kansas State. Not too sure what to expect from him. Honestly, he was kind of a lower end player anyways. Matthew Marsh returns as a 7-footer. Robert McCray and Cameron Hildreth are 2 sophomores this year. Neither really played a lot last year and panned out, but I think one of those 2 guys will eventually emerge, if not sooner rather than later, and be a usable, asset. I do like Hildreth a little bit in that role, potentially even, kind of popping into like a 6-man or starting role. And then Bobby Clintman and Zach Keller as, the youngsters, probably not playing a whole lot. So they did have an exhibition game already. They won 82-69 over Winston-Salem State. And in that game, there was Davian Williamson scoring 16 points. So if that's 5 for 6, 2 for 3, if that's anything to be believed about how the season's going to go on, I do think he's going to be one of the leading scorers on here. And then Appleby doing what he does: 6 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals. I think we'll see a lot of that from him, filling up the stat sheet and just paying off his price. But I'm really interested to see how the maturation and emergence of Damari Monsanto ends up. A lot of different transfers. Forbes has been able to utilize the transfer market early on in his Wake Forest career to perfection. So we'll see how he does it here. They're picked near the bottom of the ACC again, but like I said earlier on in the show, I can't bet against Forbes. He's a winner. So what do you think about Wake?
Yeah, I mean, I saw they brought in some quality transfers. Tyree Appleby, we saw him do it at Florida last year. Great floor general for the college game. I think he's going to come in and really help Davian Williamson really run the show. We saw Forbes, take nothing and run with it. So like you said, we can't count him out. We were playing Monsanto at 4,100 on a couple of slates. He got to start, and I remember slamming him. He got to 6x. It was great. He's going to come in there. I think he's going to right away should be playing the 3 for them. But I don't think in the exhibition, I couldn't find the box score, but I don't think he started I think they started Hildreth at the 3, and then they went with Carr and Marsh as the front court guys. I mean, whatever, it's the exhibition, remains to be seen. And I don't mind Monsanto coming off the bench. It'll keep ownership down. And we know once he comes in, he's letting the 3-ball fly. So I agree with you there. I'm a Monsanto guy too. I really do like Joe Atuka from Marist. He played with one of the guys I used to play ball with, the director of basketball operations, and Brian Dewar. He told me that Atuka can really get to the rim. He drew over 7 fouls per 40. He was the guy at Marist. I think coming off the bench for this team, he can carve out a solid role for them. I don't think he played in the exhibition. I think he was banged up a little bit, but this team's got pretty good guards. I think very underrated guards. Appleby's underrated. Williamson, and then Atuka can come in. I think that this team can be pretty solid. They bring in, Zach Keller and Bobby Clintman, a couple guys in the top 200. Remains to be seen. Two, power forward, 6'9" guys. Dude, on paper, does this team scare anybody? No, but when you got a really good coach and he can fit to the system, I think that this team can, surprise a lot of people. And if we can get anything out of Davion Bradford, a 7-footer, 270, they can run any kind of offense through him. And we can get in the emergence of Cameron Hildreth, who at times was very wild last year, pick up a ton of fouls. And every time I rostered him maybe once, maybe twice, and he just burned me both times. So I'm hoping that he can take the next step. He played like a freshman last year, and the best thing about freshmen is they become sophomores. So, I mean, I don't hate this team on paper. I think that they've got some potential here, but this is going to be tough for them in the conference, and I think that it remains to be seen how they're going to do. Wake Forest also gets a couple non-conference matchups. They get Wisco on the road, LSU, who's got a complete turnover after losing Will Wade, and they get Rutgers on the road, and then they start pretty much full gauntlet of ACC. So not terrible non-conference. They play about 2 or 3 high major opponents. So we'll see. I think this is at best maybe like 10 or 11, I think, in the conference. And at worst, it's probably like 13, 14 in that pit range. So I don't hate them. I think that they got better guards than people know about. But at the same time, it's going to be more of we're going to enjoy playing them with them in DFS. They played at top 30 tempo with Forbes last year. Defense was pretty good at 42, and their offense was right at 41 in terms of efficiency. So I definitely think we're going to have some fun with them in DFS in terms of pace. But again, in terms of real life, I think this is a team that's going to struggle to be 500. So,
yeah. Well, we did it. We got through it. That was a tough one. A lot of teams. So let's see where who's going to be the 3 categories here. Who's your top player of the year? Not even just from a media standpoint, but actual for DFS or fantasy props, whatever. Who is the top player in this conference for you at the end of the year, and who's a breakout star? And which team do you think walks out of here as the champion from the conference?
So in terms of, breakout stars or, I mean, it's hard not to go with Baycott. I don't want to go with Baycott, but it just seems like it's going to be his year again in terms of winning the conference, or Caleb Love. I love both of them. I love this UNC team. I think they win the conference. I think they have everything that you want to win the conference in terms of, guys who can really step up and take it to the next level. Breakout guys. I think Justin Mutz is a breakout guy for this league. I think, your boy Turk Smith, who I'll save for you. I think, we're going to see the Duke freshman and Lively and Dakari Whitehead really show up, and your boy down low. And Jaden Gardner, I think, is going to be a first-team All-ACC type guy this year. I think he takes the next step. I think that he projects, to be a top guy in this league. I really like his game. think he needed a year to get under our boy Tony Bennett's system, but now that he's pretty acclimated, I think he's a guy that's really going to take the next step. And in terms of what was the last question? Did I answer all of them?
Yeah. Who's gonna win the conference? I
I
guess.
think it's UNC. I dark horse I said earlier would be Virginia, but I think it's UNC.
Yeah, no, I like all of those selections. For me, I mean, yeah, I think North Carolina is definitely gonna win. They're just veteran laden, and they're just set up so nice, and everything looks great there. For me, obviously, and then like as far as the top DFS play, and he may not win the conference, but Turk Smith, I think he's just going to be such a consistent high level option. He'll have a couple down gains here or there, but he's just going to blow the doors off of each and every slate a lot, and it's going to be tough not to roster him all the time. So he's the pick for me. And then breakout, there's a couple that I think there could be. And there's a lot of guys in this conference that just feel like they're on the cusp of something big, and I don't know if it'll actually turn out that way on some of these guys, but and yeah, I did see that Monsanto didn't start in that weight game, so that's kind of sad. But for me, I think it's a 2-part on the breakout. It's for the Hokies between Sean Padula and Darius Maddox, and I think both kind of showed those flashes last year. I think this is the season that they put it together and ascend to that next level and play off each other well, and they have a good cast around them, and Justin Mutz is the star, and Couture is a good shooter. So I think that those two are primed for a big season, and I just like what the Hokies are doing. So that's the line for me. Now, there were so many teams here, and it took so long. I was hoping to get like a little bit of other stuff, but we're over the 2 hours. So I'll just ask you one last question, and we'll go from another conference. Can be a player, team. What is one other thing that people aren't, maybe that will surprise people, something that you can, kind of draw a line in the sand and say, you're here, it doesn't have to be here first, but like this player is going to have this massive season, you're going to be shocked, or this team's going to make a Final Four run. Like what's your hot take? Let me get a hot take from you before we get out of here.
I think one player that I forgot to mention and I think could be a first team all ACC type guy if everything goes right is Caleb Mills. I think he's got the chance to be a star. We saw flashes and he just couldn't stay healthy. And honestly, I think that Virginia has a very good chance to make the Final Four and win it. I don't know how super hot take it is, but they check all the boxes for me. I mean, elite coach, bringing everybody back, elite recruiting class, bringing a high-quality transfer that molds really well with their team. I think that Virginia has a very good chance to make the Final Four if that's considered a hot take enough.
Love it. All right, so mine is out. I'm going outside of the ACC and going to go into the SEC here real quick and talk about the Georgia Bulldogs just briefly. They've made some changes to their team. Terry Roberts was a guy they got from Bradley I was really excited about. Unfortunately, he's decided to step away from the team for a while. Doesn't mean he's leaving the team for good, but he's stepping away. And last year on Oklahoma State, there was chatter that Matthew, Alexander Moncrief, was going to play some point guard and really play a lot and do all this stuff. And whatever reason, Boynton didn't play him, and he didn't pan out. He decides to transfer to Georgia. And in their exhibition game against Georgia College, he played 33 minutes, so the most of anyone, had 15 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals, shot 10 free throws, made 7 of them, knocked down 4 of 7 shots, got just driving relentlessly against these guys. Matthew Alexander Moncrief is a guy I've been waiting for 2 seasons now to become a hashtag Walt's guy, become this certifiable, just fun player to watch and put up these numbers. And with Terry Roberts now stepping away, I think we'll see Moncrief play some of this guard forward role that was talked about for Oklahoma State. They do have Justin Hill, Jackson Eder, Cario Oquendo, kind of these different guards and stuff. But I think Moncrief could end up being a really big option in the SEC, and people might be surprised to hear that. But I think he's going to have a breakout season there for the Bulldogs. So that was mine. I'm hanging my hat there. We'll have to do this again. We're going to be definitely chatting in the Discord. You guys get into FTN Daily SuperShow.com. Get over to the pricing section. We have a multitude of packages from year long to, monthly. Article shows, projections, ownership stuff, but mainly that Discord access is what I hang my hat on. There's always breaking news. It has been the case in all the sports, especially college football. So having us to do that work for you and communicate, oh, this guy's out, 5 minutes to lock, there's going to be some ownership on that player, and just being able to utilize the Discord for that information is huge. So that is it. All the time we have for Stills. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me and breaking down these couple of days conferences. I'm excited, and we'll be, this weekend I'll be, building some lineups and DMing you and talking with you in Discord and stuff, and we'll get this figured out and have a good day one.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm excited, man. Monday can't come soon enough.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care. We'll talk again soon.